Liberty and justice for all. The prayer this morning will be offered by the good delegate from Baltimore County.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, on this day in 1802, President Jefferson signed legislation that established the United States Military Academy at West Point, New York, our country's first service academy and my wife's alma mater. So in honor of our Founders Day today, I offer the cadet prayer, and I invite you to pray with me. O God, our Father, thou searcher of human hearts, help us to draw near to thee in sincerity and truth. May our religion be filled with gladness, and may our worship of thee be natural. Strengthen and increase our admiration for honest dealing and clean thinking, and suffer not our hatred of hypocrisy and pretense ever to diminish. Encourage us in our endeavor to live above the common level of life. Make us to choose the harder right instead of the easier wrong, and never to be content with a half-truth when the whole can be won. Endow us with courage that is born of loyalty to all that is noble and worthy, that scorns to compromise with vice and injustice, and knows no fear when truth and right are in jeopardy. Guard us against flippancy and irreverence in the sacred things of life. Grant us new ties of friendship and new opportunities of service. Kindle our hearts in fellowship with those of a cheerful countenance, and soften our hearts with sympathy for those who sorrow and suffer. Help us to maintain the honor of the Corps untarnished and unsullied, and to show forth in our lives the ideals of West Point in doing our duty to thee and to our country. All of which we ask in the name of the great friend and master of all. Amen.
Amen. Quorum call.
Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker.
Gentlelady from Anne Arundel.
My button is not working. I'd like to be recorded as present.
Clerk will take the call.
Okay.
There being 132 members present, the House is still in session. The clerk will read the journal from the previous day.
Annapolis, Maryland, March the 6th, 2023.
Moves so much we consider the reading of the journal from the previous day.
That's not. So orders, petition, memorials, and other papers. House resolution recognizing the sponsor to introduce the group. Go ahead.
Madam Speaker. Yes. Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It is my honor and pleasure as the House Veterans Caucus Chair to honor some members of the Maryland National Guard and Maryland Defense Force. The Maryland Air National Guard, Maryland Army National Guard, and Maryland Defense Force hold annual competitions to name the best of their best. The competitions vary by group. The Warrior Games is a 4-day gauntlet with a mix of physical and mental challenges, a 40-mile ruck march over 3 days, a stress shoot, demonstration of proficiency, Army Warrior task, a mystery task, written and oral exams, as well as appearance board describes the Army Guard competition. Both Air Guard and Army Guard state warriors compete nationally. The Maryland Defense Force selection process is nomination-based. The nominations originate from commanders of their units in Maryland. The criteria for selection packets focus on the members' achievements throughout the year and hours of service. Today we have Adjutant General Major General Timothy Gowan here to accept the resolution on behalf of the winners who are Maryland Army National Guard Officer of the Year, Captain Jacob Nichols, Maryland Army National Guard Non-Commissioned Officer of the Year, Sergeant Chase Stewart, Maryland Army National Guard Soldier of the Year, Specialist Adam Merton, Maryland Air National Guard Airman of the Year, Senior Airman Joshua Phillips, Maryland Air National Guard Non-Commissioned Officer of the Year, Tech Sergeant Matthew Bellmeyer, Maryland Air National Guard Senior Non-Commissioned Officer of the Year, Senior Master Sergeant Tony Tachira, Maryland Air National Guard First Sergeant of the Year, Master Sergeant Natalie Bakash, Maryland Defense Force Officer of the Year, Captain Jason Kepler, Maryland Defense Force Non-Commissioned Officer of the Year, Sergeant First Class John W. Groves, and Maryland Defense Force Soldier of the Year, Sergeant Matthew Yates. Thank you for all of your service to our state and our nation. The winners of the families are in the gallery. Please give them a warm house round of applause.
Will the reading clerk please read the resolution in full?
Be it hereby known to all that the House of Delegates of Maryland offers its sincerest congratulations to the outstanding members of the 2022-2023 Maryland National Guard and Maryland Defense Force in recognition of being chosen as the 2022-2023 recipients of top honors in your field and for your service to our state and nation. The entire membership extends best wishes on this memorable occasion and directs this resolution to be presented on the 16th day of March 2023.
Recognizing the sponsor to introduce the group or individual.
Madam Speaker,
Yes.
on November 17, 1911, 3 undergraduate students at Howard University gave birth to the Omega Psi Phi fraternity with the assistance of their faculty advisor, Bishop Edgar Amos Love, Dr. Oscar James Cooper, Professor Frank Coleman, and Dr. Ernest Everett Just. These are the brothers that started our fraternity. The motto of our fraternity is friendship is essential to the soul because we all are truly friends. Manhood, scholarship, perseverance, and uplift, these are our adopted cardinal principles. Omega is known for its notable membership. The very first African-American governor elected in our nation, Virginia's very own Douglas Wilder, our nation's last majority whip, Congressman James Clyburn, Black America's lawyer, Ben Crump, the Surgeon General for the United States Army, Lieutenant General Scotty Dingle, and President of the CEO of University of Maryland Medical Systems also joins our ranks. Here in the state of Maryland, I'm the sole member of the General Assembly, but we are honored to have so many members amongst our elected offices across the state, starting with who you see at the front podium, our state treasurer, Derek Davis. Congressman Kwesi Mfume, Baltimore City Council President Nick Mosby, Baltimore City State's Attorney Ivan Bates, Prince George's County at-large Council Member Calvin Hawkins, Mayor of the City of Bowie, Tim Adams, Brentwood City Council Member Marcus Monroe, and Greenbelt City Council Member Rick Gordon. We are joined by brothers from all over the state of Maryland who are here to join us today. And in true Omega fashion, just to let you know, we will have some food in the Prince George's House Delegation Office because we're going to have a long day today, folks, so stop by and come fellowship with us. Thank you.
Will the reading clerk please read the resolution in full?
Be it hereby known to all that the House of Delegates of Maryland offers its sincere congratulations to Quarter 1 of the 2nd District of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated in recognition of over 75 years of service to the state of Maryland and for exhibiting the cardinal principles of manhood, scholarship, perseverance, and uplift. The entire membership extends best wishes on this memorable occasion and directs this resolution to be presented on the 16th day of March 2023.
Special order calendar number 30. The clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 200, Budget Bill, Fiscal Year 2024, Committee Reports. Favorable.
Recognizing the chair of the committee.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker and members of the House of Delegates, the House Appropriations Committee recommends 127 amendments to the budget. These are indicated on the committee report and the committee report distributed on Monday. On Monday, I mentioned how proud I am of this budget. Despite the challenges of looming structural deficit and unexpected revenue write-down, this budget invests in our children by fully funding education. It supports disadvantaged individuals in need of health care, mental health support, and housing services. It provides the resources needed to breathe new life into our state employee workforce. In addition, the budget we have before you today goes beyond the spending affordability recommendations and provides over $3.2 billion in cash reserves and $227 million in structural surplus, so we can continue to protect the investment of our future. Madam Speaker, I would now like to turn to the committee amendments. I will introduce the amendments in the committee report in groups. After describing the amendments, I will then move for each group to be adopted. I ask members to hold any additional amendments until after the committee amendments have been considered. With your permission, Madam Speaker, let me now turn to the first group of amendments. Move so much we consider the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
Amendments 1 through 8 pertain to the judiciary, the Maryland Emergency Administration, boards, commissions, and other offices, the Historic St. Mary's City Commission, and the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention, Youth, and Victim Services. In the judiciary, Amendment 1 restricts funds for the implementation of appointed attorney program. In the Maryland Energy Administration, Amendments 2 and 3 reduce funds. Amendment 4 deletes duplicative funding for a program in boards, commissions, and offices. And the Historic St. Mary's Commission, Amendment 5 restricts funds pending an audit. In the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention, Youth, and Victim Services, Amendment 6 restricts funds pending an audit. Amendments 7 and 8 restrict funds pending a report and require funds to be distributed in a certain manner. Move Amendments 1 through 8.
Question for the House is the adoption of the committee amendments 1 through 8. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The amendments are adopted. Question is adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by
A few more amendments, Madam
Yes,
Speaker.
I know.
Yep. Okay. Amendments 9 through 17 pertain to the Maryland Stadium Authority, the Military Department, the Maryland Lottery and Gaming Control Agency, and the Department of Budget and Management, the Department of Information Technology, and the Department of General Services. In the Maryland Stadium Authority, Maryland 9 restricts funds pending agreements for facility renovations. In the Military Department, Amendment 10 and 11 strike language delete funding for a program. In the Maryland Lottery and Gaming Agency, Amendment 12 deletes funds for televised lottery drawings that are no longer occurring. In the Department of Budget and Management, Amendment 13 and 14 prohibit the transfer of funds until a certain date and reduce funds. In the Department of Information Technology, Amendment 15 reduces funding. In the Department of General Services, Amendments 16 and 17 add language identifying miscellaneous capital grant programs. Move the adoption of Amendments 9 through 17.
Question for the House is the adoption of committee amendments 1 through 17. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The gentleman from Hartford.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to pull out amendments 10 and 11 for discussion.
Okay, we can pull out amendments 10 and 11 for discussion, Madam Speaker, and I'll defer to the gentleman to see what discussion he has.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a couple questions on what these amendments do, Mr. Chair.
Madam Speaker. Okay.
Hold on a second. Okay. We need to adopt
9 and 11
yes.
through, move the adoption of Amendment 9, Madam Speaker.
Okay. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Amendment 9 has been adopted. Gentleman from Hartford.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Floor Leader, can you please tell me what Amendment 10 and 11 do?
I can talk to you a little bit about Amendment 10, and that's the National Guard Health Insurance Program. So the TRICARE Health Insurance Program, we're pulling those funds out simply because this was all actually attached to a bill that the House is not going to move. There was approximately $5 million that was attached to look at TRICARE Health for our National Guardsmen. There were a number of questions that the committee had about the bill, specifically around the idea of double dipping, where the funding was coming from in terms of whether these guardsmen were getting them from their employers as well as from the state. And there's actually a no-cost insurance program that's also on the table. And so instead of moving the funds or actually having those funds attached to the bill, what we decided to do was take those funds out and even included budget language to make sure that there's a study done in the interim to figure out whether or not we can actually do this insurance program through the state.
Thank you very much for that answer. Madam Speaker, my concern with these two amendments this is related to House Bill 553, which was the governor's bill to allow for TRICARE premium reimbursement for our National Guard folks. And we just, this today actually honors some of our National Guard folks. This is the same National Guard that protected the Capitol here during the first days of COVID, the same folks that protect our state in times of emergency and natural disasters. And the same National Guard that we sent down to Washington, D.C. Following January 6th. So I know there's some complications with this legislation. I appreciate the committee's work. But I stand here today to proudly support our governor's initiative to support our National Guard and their families. And I would request to vote down Amendment 10 and vote down Amendment 11 as well. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker.
Floor Leader.
Yeah, members, let me just help you understand. This is not a cut to the Maryland National Guard. Obviously, we support the Maryland National Guard. We support the governor and his support for the Maryland National Guard. This is not a cut. This funding was contingent on a bill. And so there are options on the table to make sure that as we come back and look at this bill, review whether or not the funding should be available for this program, that can happen, and it will happen when we come back. However, right now, we're looking at the funding that was contingent to a bill that we are not moving at this time. And so while we do continue to support the Maryland National Guard, we're not supporting them with this program that was contingent, again, on a bill. And so with that, I would ask you to not move forward with these amendments.
Recognizing the Minority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. If the floor leader could just expound upon that for a minute. Am I correct in my understanding that I think the governor had a bill that would expand or pay more essentially for National Guardsmen's health benefits. Is that the bill that you're referring to?
This was the bill to look at funding for National Guard's benefits for their health insurance, the TRICARE Health Program, which is actually a federal program that's done. And so what we're trying to do is make sure that as we're looking at that program, there are a number of questions on the table, but we want to look at all options, not just this one option.
Okay. So would it be fair to say then that the governor's bill that had a particular funding element to it, if we're going to spend X amount of our funds to fund these health benefits for National Guard personnel and their families, that you're suggesting to me that the decision has been made, we're not going to move forward with the governor's bill, so therefore we don't need the reserve funding?
It isn't. I won't say that this is reserve funding. This is the funding that
You don't
was
need the
actually
dedicated
contingent.
funding that was contingent on the bill.
Right.
Because the bill's dead.
The bill is dead.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any further debate on the amendment? Amendment number 10. All in favor signify by saying aye. Oppose? No one got up, so the amendment, passed.
Madam Speaker.
Recognizing the majority leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have a lot of questions about this, but no, just kidding. There's been some questions about how to follow along with what's going on. If you log into your floor system and click on Menu and click on Operating, and then click on House Reprint Budget Bill, it'll bring up the report, and the amendments are marked with black squares on the right margin, so you can follow along if you're interested in keeping track of the action if you don't have it printed out like the minority leader. So thank you, Madam Speaker.
Okay. Amendment 11. All in favor signify by saying aye. Oppose? All right.
Madam Speaker, move amendments 12 through 17.
Okay. Question for the House is to move amendments 12 through 17. All in favor signify by saying aye. Oppose? The amendments 12 through 17 have been adopted.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Amendments 18 through 28 pertain to the Department of Service and Civic Innovation, Department of Transportation, Department of Natural Resources, and Department of Agriculture. In the Department of Service and Civic Innovation, Amendment 18 makes funding for a program contingent on legislation. In the Department of Transportation, Amendments 19 through 25 are annual language. In the Transit Administration, Amendment 26 restricts funding into a report. In the Department of Natural Resources, Amendment 27 restricts funding pending a report. In the Department of Agriculture, Amendment 28 reduces funding. Move Amendments 18 through 28.
Question for the House is the adoption of amendments 18 through 28. All in favor signify by saying aye. Oppose? The ayes have it. The amendments have been adopted. Committee Chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Amendments 29 through 59 pertain to the Department of Health. The Department of Health, Amendment 29 and 35 are technical to alter contingent language. Amendments 30 through 33, 36, 38 through 43, 48 through 50, and 52 add language restricting funds pending submission of reports. Amendment number 34 reduces funds due to the delay in timing of accelerated provider rate increases. In the Office of Healthcare Quality, Amendment 37 reduces funds due to the increase in turnover expectancy. Amendments 44, 47, 51, 55, 57, and 58 restrict funding to its budgeted purpose. Amendment 45 and 46 restrict funds to one-time purposes and pending a report on those uses. In the Medical Care Programs Administration, Amendment 53 and 54 add language restricting funds pending reports on eligibility redeterminations and recent rate increases. Amendments 56 and 59 reduce funding for provider reimbursements. Move Amendments 29 through 59.
Question for the House is the adoption of amendments 29 through 59. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Amendments have been adopted. Recognizing the committee chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Amendments 60 through 70 pertain to the Department of Human Services, the Department of Labor, and the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services. In the Department of Human Services, Amendment 60 restricts funds pending a report on oversight. Amendments 61 through 63 restrict funds to their budgeted purposes. Amendment 64 reduces unneeded federal funds. In the Family Investment Administration, Amendment 65 restricts funds pending a report on the resolution of repeat audit findings. In the Department of Labor, Amendments 66 and 67 restrict funds pending reports. Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services, Amendments 68 through 70 restrict funds pending reports. Move the adoption of Amendments 60 through 70.
Question for the House is adoption of committee amendments 60 through 70. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Amendments have been adopted. Committee Chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Amendments 71 through 88 pertain to the Maryland State Department of Education, the Accountability and Implementation Board, Morgan State University, Maryland Higher Education Commission, and the Baltimore City Community College. The Maryland State Department of Education, Amendments 71 and 72 restrict funds pending reports. Amendments 73 and 74 strike language and reduce funds in innovative programs. Amendments 75 and 76 reduce funds and authorize funds to be replaced with federal funds. Amendments 77 through 80 specify requirements and require a report for programs that provide aid to non-public schools. And the Accountability and Implementation Board, Amendment 81 deletes funds. In Morgan State University, Amendment 82 restricts funds pending a report. In MHAC, Amendment 83 reduces funds contingent on legislation. Amendments 84 through 86 are technical. In Baltimore City Community College, Amendment 87 and 88 restricts funds pending reports. Move the adoptions of Amendments 71 through 88.
Question for the House is the adoption of committee amendments 71 through 88. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The amendments have been adopted. Committee Chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Amendments 89 through 104 pertain to the Department of Housing and Community Development, the Department of Commerce, the Maryland Technology Development Corp., the Maryland Department of the Environment, the State Reserve Fund, and deficiency appropriations. The Department of Housing and Community Development, Amendment 89 restricts funds to be used for certain projects. In the Department of Commerce, Amendment 90 restricts funds pending notice of planned use. In the Maryland Technology Development Corporation, Amendment 91 makes funding contingent on legislation. In the Maryland Department of Environment, Amendments 92 through 94 restrict funds pending reports. The State Reserve Fund, Amendments 95 through 99, reduce funds in the Rainy Day Fund and Dedicated Purpose Account. Amendments 100 and 102 through 104 reduce deficiency appropriations in the Department of Budget and Management and the Department of Health. Amendment 101 makes funds for a new program contingent on legislation. Move for the adoption of Amendments 89 through 104.
Question for the House is adoption of committee amendments 89 through 104. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Amendments have been adopted. Committee Chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Amendments 105 through 107 pertain to back of the bill sections. Amendment 105 and 106 add annual language. Amendment 107 adds funds for legislative priorities. Amendments 108 through 110 restrict funds for multiple agencies pending reports. Amendment 111 through 117 add annual language concerning the fiscal 25 budget submission and budget process. Amendment 118 requires a report. Amendment 119 requires certain notification. Amendments 120 through 124 establish reporting and other requirements related to personnel. Amendments 125 through 126 restrict funds in various agencies pending reports. Amendment 127 is technical. Move Amendments 105 through 107.
Question for the House is the adoption of committee amendments 105 through 127. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed?
Madam Speaker, I'd like to separate Amendment 107 for discussion.
It's fine. Can we vote on
and move all the others? Yes.
Can we vote on 105 and 106?
105 through 126. All in favor?
Through 106.
106. What?
Just 105 and 106. Then we can take a vote on 107, Madam Speaker.
Yeah, I was about to say that. All right, so what do you want? Okay, all right. Board is fixed now. Okay. All in favor, 105 through 106. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The amendments have been adopted. Recognizing the minority leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. House Amendment 107, as the Appropriations Committee Chair just indicated, I think he phrased it as the funding of legislative priorities. I don't know, much like my friend, the appropriations leader, we don't use a floor system. So I don't know what you all necessarily are looking at. We practice law, we just deal in paper. So I'm looking at the paper. There are, let's see, there are 55 separate line items included in Budget Amendment 107, adding up, frankly, to hundreds of millions of dollars in one budget amendment. There are a tremendous amount of things in this budget amendment from the Appropriations Committee that we would like, and there are a tremendous amount of things that I suspect, if you really took a look at it, that each one of you would like, because it's a very crafty, very, very intelligent way. The gentleman that heads the Appropriations Committee, his team and his staff are very, very smart people, and they included everything in an omnibus fashion in this amendment, and I would say that the vast majority of things people would like. In fact, there's money going for capital projects to my district in this bill. There's money going to support police officers in this bill, in this amendment. There's a lot of good things in there. And the problem under our rules is that you can't amend an amendment. And I'm sure that the folks who constructed this are aware of that. And so what you can't do is separate out some of the 55 line items. You have to vote one way or the other. And that puts us in a difficult position, because I will tell you that there's $5 million in general funds added to the Maryland Department of Health to support abortion care and family planning services. And that's difficult for many people in this chamber, regardless of your position on the legality of abortion or the constitutionality thereof. There is opposition to the public funding of abortion services, to taking taxpayer dollars of people of particular faiths that find this to be morally objectionable, and using that taxpayer funding to finance those services as a government program as opposed to an individual right or entitlement. There's also $5 million in general funds to be added to assist with the resettlement in Maryland of immigrants who are relocated to Maryland jurisdictions from other areas. I'll be blunt, I don't know exactly completely what that means. I think that if it meant that you had individuals escaping war-torn Ukraine who were being brought here to enable them to reconnect with family members they have in the United States and to be safe, I don't think there'd be any opposition to that. Shouldn't be. If it involves, however, some of the things that we have seen going on because of the failure of our federal counterparts in Washington to adequately deal with immigration policy in this country, where the states are now getting in and throwing haymakers. Some states are saying, we're a sanctuary state. Send all people who cross the border undocumented, send them to us, and we'll take care of them. And some states are saying, they're throwing haymakers in the other direction. We'll facilitate these people coming to our state and put them on a plane and fly them to Nantucket or bus them to Midtown Manhattan. We'll show you. Now you have to take care of them. That's a failure. We can't control that. But that is a failure of a federal policy, that we have states doing these things back and forth to each other and forcing them to care or not care for individuals who are not in this country lawfully but are part of a federal problem. And so there's $5 million in there for that. There's money in there for other things. Because those things exist, because they have been included in the omnibus amendment, many of us think that this amendment cannot be, should not be in our budget. And it's a difficult decision. I'm going to be bluntly honest with you. I hope I'm not playing too many cards. I'm sure this isn't a shocker or doesn't really matter. I'm going to vote for the operating budget because I believe that the operating budget overall, there are hundreds of thousands of things in it, overall is pretty good. But it becomes hard when I don't want to use the phrase poison pill because that reflects some type of malice, but when things are in the budget and in the amendments that are objectionable that we can't separate out and say, hey, I just want to talk about this. I just want to be clear and on the record, I'm not for this. So I want to be clear and on the record. I'm for an awful lot of things of these 55 things that are included in this budget amendment. But I can't support a few of those things, and I don't think other people here in the chamber can as well. And as a result, that's why we would seek to separate and have a vote on Committee Amendment 107 and request that it be rejected. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Floor Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you to my good friend and good colleague, the Minority Leader, for his comments on the budget. A budget that was bipartisan, that we worked very hard on in our committee to really try to reflect all of the values that we share as a state and all of us across this entire beautiful chamber share. As the good gentleman noted, Amendment number 107 includes funding for a number of projects that are critical across our state. We have funding for public school construction in some jurisdictions. We have funding for Boys and Girls Clubs in other jurisdictions, and other similar projects that really are critical to the operations of the fabric of our state. Now, I want to rise because he also mentioned abortion funding that we included. So this amendment references as well $3.5 million of abortion care services reimbursement funding that is provided to cover the costs of services, healthcare services that are provided to poor women in our state. It also includes $1.5 million for family planning, supporting our federally funded Title X centers across the state that offer things that all of us should agree to, including contraception management and cancer screenings and so many other healthcare services that are really intended at getting to what all of us want, which is to reduce unintended pregnancies and ultimately abortions as a result of those. Now, back to the $3.5 million. Our state has recognized for 40 years, since 1979, that abortion is a fundamental right guaranteed to women and pregnant people here in the state. We have funded through Medicaid in FY22, I put it down because I knew it would come up, we spent $7.6 million providing these services in FY22. Now, this is the latest data that's available to us because FY22 is July 1st through June 30th of 2023, and our providers have up to a year to submit their reimbursement claims. But that provided care for 11,567 women in our state. And it's critical care. It is health care access for these women. Now, you may agree with abortion or you may disagree, and that is a fundamental difference of opinion that we may share. However, it is the policy of this state that we believe that poor women should have the same access to health care services as those who are privately insured. Now, I can tell you many stories of women that I've spoken with that have had to seek this procedure, many of whom had to seek it due to a tragedy that occurred later in pregnancy, and it was not something that they wanted to have. However, we cannot, as policymakers, decide the fate of thousands of women who are pregnant and make those health care, personal, private decisions on their behalf. And that is why I will ask all of my colleagues here to support the committee work product and ensure that the abortion care and family planning money remains intact. Thank you.
Madam Speaker.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker, members of the House. I rise to address another point that the minority leader particularly pointed out in this amendment, and that is the $5 million for resettlement money that is absolutely critical to literally some of the most vulnerable people that have come to our state. Now, the minority leader is correct. There are certain states putting people on buses and planes and trains to deal with what they believe to be a problem within their own state. And the cause of that, whether it's federal or whether it's those individual states making those decisions, is not for us here to debate. What is for us here to debate is what we do with these vulnerable people when they arrive to our state. What do they do? These people have no homes, they have no source of income, they have no food. What do we do as a state that is compassionate and caring for all? Now, I know some folks will say these are undocumented immigrants, but also they're not. Now, we don't have a lot of data as to the folks who are coming here. What we do know from news reports and other sources is that some of the people that have been put on buses and shipped to other states, they're documented.
They're asylum seekers. They have filed their paperwork. They are recognized by Immigrations and Customs, and yet they were still put on buses through coercion and lies, and in some cases, and I'll use the word, outright kidnapping. And some of them have shown up in our state. And we, as a compassionate state, as a caring state, we're going to do what we can to provide them housing and food and basic necessities for as long as we can until they can find a permanent and settled place to be. And I think $5 million is really not a lot to obligate so that we can meet a humanitarian need. Thank you.
Maker of the motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So I'm a person, as I think most people in this room are, of empathy, and I appreciate the remarks of my friend from Montgomery County. But what I would suggest to you is all money becomes significant. We stand up and we say, we'll be talking later today likely about things like the Boost program, and we say $2 million, and we're told, well, $2 million is a lot of money, we got to cut that. $5 million is a lot of money then, because it's 2.5 times $2 million. So I agree that if there are individuals who are here in the state of Maryland, that they should be treated with compassion, particularly if they are legally allowed under federal law to continue to remain here during the processing of their immigration status. But I would suggest to you that at a time when we tell our own taxpayers many, many, many times, we tell our own constituents, our own individuals, we cannot provide this service, we cannot provide this investment, we cannot provide X amount for your school, we cannot provide Y amount for your fire company, we cannot provide Z amount to help you have more police, we cannot provide this, that, and the next thing, that we have to be judicious about how we do these things. And this is a role primarily for private organizations, which I hope step up to provide these types of things. It's a role for the federal government, which I'm sure under the Biden administration has lots of money sloshing around in ways to help individuals, particularly those who are lawfully here. You would think that the Biden administration would have a program that would enable those individuals to have basic human necessities and needs. No one wants to see any individual not have basic human necessities and needs. We don't want to see children, we don't want to see vulnerable adults on the streets with nothing. But we're taking $5 million of your taxpayers' money and we're using it for that purpose because of this failed system where these individuals become pawns. And that's the reason for me. It's not out of any empathy. It's not out of any concern. It's out of that policy objective and out of the desperate need of money in a budget where we're all being told this year, next year, you have to fight for every $100,000. That's where the $5 million is part of is going. And on that basis and on that basis alone, because again, I believe that a tremendous amount of things in the amendment are very well thought out and very important. But on that principle, Madam Speaker, we would request that we have a vote on Committee Amendment 107. Thank you.
On the amendment, 107, number 107. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Roll call.
Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, I think,
Yes.
Madam Speaker, just a reminder to my colleagues, if you're sticking with the committee, you want to vote green. And if you're sticking with our friends in the minority party, you want to vote red. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Sorry. I'm so used when he gets up. Has everyone recorded their vote? Clerk will take the call. Amendment passes. Committee Chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move amendments 108 through 127.
Question before the House is the amendments 108 through 127. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. It's passed. That's it.
Madam Speaker.
Minority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I wanted to briefly rise. I believe a colleague of mine from Anne Arundel County will be offering an amendment. I did want to take this opportunity to thank, frankly, sincerely, the Appropriations Committee Chair and the leadership and your staff for working with us in the Republican Party. With respect to this amendments process, it's the first year that we've had these budgetary rules and things in place, and as I said the other day, many of you may not be familiar with the vagaries and sometimes the difficulties in having amendments drafted in a way that we all acknowledge them in a timely fashion. And I do appreciate the fact that everyone has agreed, I believe, that we'll be able to offer. I'll let you know this. Maryland plays at 12:15. I'm aware of that. I don't think we have a tremendous amount of amendments, but I think the amendments that we have are well-meaning, they're important, they're principled, and we'll attempt to offer them in that spirit. And I appreciate my friend and the Speaker staff for facilitating that today. With that, Madam Speaker, I would certainly yield to the gentlelady from Anne Arundel County, who I believe has an amendment at the desk. Thank you.
Gentlelady from Anne Arundel.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Yeah, but can you let us adopt the favorable report first, please?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Question for the House is to adopt the favorable report with amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? You want to take a roll call? Okay. The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Gentlelady from Anne Arundel.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I have an amendment at the desk. It's amendment number 603028.
Amendment number 1.
Move so much be considered the reading of the amendment.
So order.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, I rise today on this floor to offer my first and perhaps my only amendment to you all for this session. And I don't do that lightly. So I would like to speak to each one of you, as well as our distinguished Madam Speaker, our Governor, and Lieutenant Governor this morning. The Boost program provides our lowest income, most disadvantaged, and often forgotten and left behind Maryland families with a lifeline for their children to attend a school that will change their life for the better, forever. The fact that this happens for students given this opportunity is an indisputable fact. If you don't believe me, you can look at the data or perhaps read the governor's book. If you think Maryland does not have school choice, you are wrong. The tragedy is only wealthy Marylanders have that choice. Poor Marylanders who want the same choice are the only ones you are hurting today with removing $2 million from Maryland's Boost program. In fact, a member of this committee just said on the floor about 10 minutes ago that the goal of this budget was to represent the wide swath of different Marylanders all across the state. I applaud that goal. That's what I'm here for too. When we all were outside for Governor's inaugural address on January 18th here in Annapolis, Maryland, he said, "We've been asked to accept that some of us must be left behind. That in order for some to win, others must lose. And not only that, we have come to expect that the people who have always lost will keep losing. Well, we must refuse to accept that. Instead, I am asking you to believe that Maryland can be different, that Maryland can be bold, that Maryland can lead. It is time for our policies to be as bold as our aspirations and to confront the fact that we have been offered false choices. Colleagues, I represent to you today that we have been offered a false choice regarding the fact that a program that supports the poorest, most vulnerable children in Maryland and gives their families the opportunity to send them to a school that will change their life forever takes something away from any other child in Maryland. The funding for this program, under my amendment, would not take funding from any child in the state of Maryland. And with that, Madam Speaker, I move the amendment.
Floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to the maker of the amendment for ensuring that we were able to get that on time. Dear friends, I do have a great deal of compassion for the message that was shared with all of us. I think we all agree that every Maryland student deserves the best first shot to create a good life. But I do want to just lift up a couple of things that were shared. One, the Boost program, for those who may not be familiar. Anyone that's currently enrolled in it and any eligible sibling, there's enough funding in this budget to continue supporting their education. So in no way will they have their education shortcut through this budget. But what we are saying through this budget is that because we are going to see through the current commitments and that of eligible siblings, there's no need to have the additional $2 million because there's no one else that will be enrolled after that that will need that budgetary funding. And so for that simple reason, I do ask you to resist this amendment. Thank you.
Gentlelady pushing your amendment.
Absolutely, Madam Speaker.
Okay. Question for the House is the adoption of the amendment. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed?
Roll call.
Roll call.
Madam Speaker.
Clerk will take the call. The amendment fails. Right
Madam
there.
Speaker.
Gentleman from Anne Arundel.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Good morning.
Good morning.
I have an amendment at the desk. It's an amendment number 973-121/1.
Amendment number 1.
Move so much be considered the reading of the amendment.
So ordered.
Thank you. This amendment, we just heard from the floor leader, my friend from Baltimore, that this General Assembly is phasing out the Boost system, which provides scholarships to students in all of the state, in all of the jurisdictions of Maryland. What my amendment does is it reverses that. It keeps the Boost program operating, and let me tell you why I think that's important. I'll never forget, I was at a polling place in Glen Burnie, and this little boy was there with his mom, and he was going to vote with his mom. He looked, I think he was in 5th grade, and I asked him what school he went to. He told me, and I said, "Do you like it?" And he says, "I love it." I said, "Really, where do you go?" And he told me all about it, and the mom said that he's in the Boost program, and he hated school. He was going to a Anne Arundel County public school, one that I happened to have gone to when I was a kid, and he hated it. And she got him into the Boost program, got him into a private school through the program, and she told me that on Saturdays they offer tutoring. And when Isaiah misbehaves or doesn't do what his mom asked him to do, she would say, "Look, you need to do this thing or I'm not going to let you go to tutoring on Saturday." And he would get his stuff done because he loved it so much. I mean, think about that. Think about what if he did not have that in his life. And that's what we're doing to kids like Isaiah. There's future generations of Marylanders who will be handicapped to a perpetually failing school. Respectfully, I think that's like a shameful thing to do when we know it's working, we know it's changing lives. And so, my friends and colleagues, I ask you to adopt this amendment. Preserve the Boost funding for Marylanders like Isaiah, who have been given a chance at a better life through the Boost program, which we all supported in a bipartisan manner in the past. We know it's working. It's a choice. Please support the amendment. Thank you.
Floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and also thank you to the maker of that amendment for also getting that to us in advance. I appreciate you sharing the story about Isaiah, and I mean, anyone that wants to go to school on a Saturday, I think we can all agree that's an awesome, turn of events. But I do also want to point out for the body that prior to Boost, I believe going into effect in 2017, and also after the time Boost phases out, Isaiah School could offer scholarships to Isaiah and the future Isaiahs, should that be their prerogative. Not just because it's the right thing to do, but I think that all the people that have been blessed to receive the private educations that many of our Boost recipients are receiving now, maybe some of the people in this chamber themselves, I believe there's a distinguished alumni base from many of these institutions that through their own commitment could ensure that other people could walk through those doors in the future. So I would submit to the body that we resist this amendment, because public dollars should be for public education. And ultimately, I believe that it's concerning to me that the only way some institutions are saying that they can help the less fortunate receive a private education is through government subsidy. I find that concerning, and I do request that the rest of this body resist this amendment.
Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from Anne Arundel.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. They do provide scholarships. They do give free education. They are nonprofits, but they have to be able to pay their bills. So if they have no revenue that comes in the door from payers, they turn off the lights and they shutter. There was an era in Maryland when a lot of private schools were closing. Unfortunately, due to some policies in the state, especially during COVID, they're now flourishing. It's going much better. A lot of people are leaving public schools right now and moving over to private schools and homeschooling. But the bottom line is these schools today, and have always, given free scholarships to kids in poverty. They just can't afford to do it for everybody. You know, we pride ourselves on being in a state of middle temperament, and frankly, I think we should have a full voucher system to every kid and have real competition in public education. I don't think that's going to pass here. That would be seen as extreme. But as a position of middle temperament, having this voucher system for the poorest kids throughout the entire state of Maryland, who have also been wedded to a perpetually failing school, I think that's a middle ground that we can all agree on. And I hope that you'll adopt the amendment. Thank you.
Madam Speaker.
Is it floor leader? Again. Okay. Minority.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to say something briefly, a little bit differently. I had a very different experience with this. So it is true, 56% of the people who access the Boost program are children of color. There is a high concentration of them in some of our urban areas. I live in a place not like that. I'm not Catholic, never was. I had an opportunity when I went to high school to go to a Catholic high school, a private Catholic high school where I live. It's poor. I hate to say that. I hate to come here year after year. I hate it. I hate the words in my mouth. But it is. It's not a economically thriving place. We hate that. And the school that exists there, it's a K through 12 school. I only went there for high school. I was actually recruited in a weird way to go there. It was very meaningful for me. I didn't want to go. My parents were divorced. My parents encouraged me to go. My father lived in Baltimore County. He wanted me to go to McDonough. My mother didn't want that to happen. And so the compromise they came up with is that I went to this school. There's another delegate, I won't mention her name, there's another delegate here in this room who also went to this school for a period of her childhood. And it was a changing impact. It was a good school. It gave me the ability to think. I came from a small town, and they said, hey, you will go to college. You will not get in trouble. You will go away. You will go do things in life that will make an impact. It made an impact on me. And I can tell you, my mother did get scholarships. She did get money. When I went to that school, my mother was putting herself through college and eventually through law school. My mother didn't graduate law school until I was actually in college. She went back as a second career. And so we didn't have a whole heck of a lot of money, to be frankly honest with you. And that school still exists today. And what I can tell you, in tiny little Allegheny County, 30 years ago, there were quite a number of private Catholic archdiocesan schools. But because faith is something that has become ephemeral to a certain extent in American life, and there are not as many people of that faith that are supporting those schools have dwindled and dwindled and dwindled to where today there is just one. There used to be probably half a dozen elementary schools, multiple middle schools, multiple high schools that fed, and there is just one. And there are people in my community today who are middle class, who work for the state of Maryland as correctional officers, overseeing some of the most violent inmates in the state at the North Branch Correctional Institution, who work for a company called Hunter Douglas that just announced last week that they're closing and taking 361 more jobs out of our community that make $35,000, $45,000 a year. And they want better for their kids. They want them to hear when they're 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 years old, you will go to college, you will achieve something, you will go farther than what I had the opportunity to do. And this program helps some of them. That's all it does. It helps some of them. I'm not saying our public schools are bad in Allegheny County. I'm not saying that they're the greatest. But there are more opportunities. There are some families for whom this provides the only way that they think they can get their kid an opportunity to do this. It's not a rich, expensive, Tony, fancy private school. It's about $7,000 a year to go there. Believe me, if you came there, you would not say, wow, this is Georgetown Prep. Wow, this is Loyola Blakefield. It's not. It's just a place for kids to go and get a different type of education and academic focus. And middle class and lower middle class families where I live can't do it, not all of them, without this program. That's all it is. I hope that you support the gentleman's amendment. Thank you.
Madam Speaker.
Gentlelady from Anne Arundel.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Since we're talking about the costs and public funding and taxpayer dollars, I'd like to remind the body that it costs about $18,500 to educate each and every child in our public schools. And we're not all parents, so some people might not be aware of that. I have 5 small children. 3 of them are currently in elementary school. So $18,500 to educate one child in the public school each year. So the average tuition cost at the schools we're discussing is about $7,800 total. So when we're talking about taxpayers' money, our constituents' money, a lot less is going to get a lot more for these small children. And further, this body gives hundreds of millions of dollars to private colleges every single year. We've heard some of that on the floor today, right? We give taxpayer public funds to private colleges and also preschools. So when we're talking about public funds and taxpayer dollars, I want to make sure we're not parroting incorrect information from special interest groups, and we remember that we're actually here to take care of children, because if we can take care of students going to college, why can't we take care of the youngest, the smallest, and the most vulnerable among us? Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And thank you to all of my colleagues for their comments. And I do think it was really great that you mentioned that it's important for us all to be operating from the same facts and not to be operating from any misinformation. So first I want to begin with who is currently receiving Boost. It is not 65% students of color. It's actually, it's 56, so it's a little bit different. 56, 65, a little bit different. So just want to lift that up. Also wanted to mention that when we're discussing the costs of public education, public schools have to educate everyone that comes through their doors, no matter their condition, no matter their ability, no matter what they're bringing through the door. Public school has to educate you. Private schools get to edit and decide who they want to extend education to. So we're not comparing apples to apples. But also, you were pointing out that this is something that is inherently better. And the data, self-reported by Boost participating institutions, does not indicate that it's just a better resulting product. When we're looking at self-reported assessments on English and language arts, math, science, on the whole, Boost students perform 11 points lower than non-Boost students. So on the whole, it's not magical that because you participate in the Boost experience that you're getting a better product. Now, I want to also lift up something for our consideration, because we keep saying, you know, why not offer this opportunity for very deserving young people? When we started the Boost program, the majority of the students that received Boost funding were already enrolled at the school. I'll say it one more time. The majority of students at the dawn of this program that received Boost funding were already enrolled at the school. Now, I can't tell you what people are doing with the budget line items once they're freed up because of government subsidy, but I'm sure there have been commitments for those funds that were once allotted to provide some support to other things they would want to do. So let's not forget that this money, people have been relying upon this subsidy to prioritize other things they would like to do at the school, and particularly when we consider that many of these students were not new to the building. But last but not least, I do want to say that it's really important that we reserve public dollars for public institutions on the amendment regarding Boost, because if we allow this to continue, we will have two competing realities. And I don't believe that's what we all passed the Blueprint for Maryland's Future. I hope that we will never, 10 years from now, have someone be able to rise and say that certain schools are perpetually trapped in any form of failure. Because if that is the case, then that will be our collective failure. At the very time that we're trying to improve the quality of education for every Marylander, not just so that they can compete with our neighbors in Virginia, not just so they can compete with Pennsylvania, but that they can compete globally. I hope that we understand that we're across purposes if we want to continue two separate school systems that don't offer the same quality and the same options. So again, I submit to my colleagues here to resist this amendment. Everyone that's in Boost now will continue to be in it, as will their eligible siblings. And then after that, we can continue to focus on strengthening Maryland's school system. Thank you all.
Madam Speaker.
Gentlemen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The facts are the facts. The majority of the dollars that are being used from this program are from students who transferred from a perpetually failing school. Those are the facts. I can bring you the data and show you the facts. I move the amendment. Thank you.
On the amendment, all in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed?
Roll call, Madam Speaker.
Roll call.
Madam Speaker.
To explain my vote, Madam Speaker.
Yes, you may.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I am green on this because this is about children. It is not about systems. It is not about schools. It is about giving children an opportunity to succeed. 20 years ago, when Bob Ehrlich was governor, we had chronically failing schools in Baltimore City, where I taught and where my children went to school. Today, more than 20 years later, many of those schools are still failing. These children cannot wait. They cannot wait for the blueprint to be implemented. They cannot wait another year. Every year that we fail to give students an adequate education and we refuse to give them another opportunity is a failure of this body. I am green.
Any other further explanation of your vote?
Yes, Madam Speaker, to explain my vote briefly.
Yes, go ahead.
I am proudly voting red on this amendment, as I did for my dear friend from Anne Arundel's amendment, because of the fact, friends, that private schools do not have to comply with the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and many private schools exclude students with disabilities. And that's why the Vice Chair of the Ways and Means Committee worked on a non-discrimination bill. So my friend, the Minority Leader, talked about giving kids a chance, but let's give all kids a chance in the public schools, because I wouldn't have a seat at the table at many private schools. Thank you.
All right, clerk would take the call. The amendment fails.
Madam Speaker.
Gentlelady from Frederick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have an amendment at the desk. It is amendment number 283325/1.
Amendment number 1.
Move so much be considered the reading of the amendment.
So ordered.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. First, I would like to recognize and thank Governor Moore for his advocacy for women's health, women's mental health, and his support that surgeries, especially those like late-term abortions, should only be performed by licensed physicians and surgeons. In this increasingly polarized world of politics, it is important that we focus more on those areas where we share common ground. However, when talking about a mental health evaluation from a surgeon or even a primary care doctor, they can often look something like this. My teenage daughter had a physical. The doctor asked her a few questions about how she was feeling and if she had friends. We thought, how nice that this primary care doctor was interested in her life. A month or so later, we received a bill for a mental health screening, which was not covered by our insurance, by the way. So apparently, these very basic questions were used to certify that my daughter was in good mental health. If this funding is truly to protect women's physical and mental health in a crisis pregnancy situation, will it provide prenatal counseling, sonograms to assess a mother's health status so that she can give informed consent to the procedure? And does it include post-abortion, medical, psychological, and additional treatment if needed? I have been blessed to have 3 beautiful babies. When I was pregnant with my first daughter, I had a high-risk pregnancy. And during my second trimester, there was a complete block between my atria and my ventricles, and this caused them to beat out of sync. I was scheduled to have a pacemaker in my 3rd trimester because the procedure would be too risky during the second. We also had to go for a fetal echocardiogram to make sure that the baby's heartbeat was okay. And then I had weekly sonograms after that. And I remember looking into my husband's eyes and telling him in no uncertain terms that if he had to choose between my life and the life of our beautiful daughter, then he needed to put our daughter first and choose her. I understand the enormous difficulty of these circumstances and choices that have to be made. And I also remember during my sonogram, one of my many sonograms, seeing my baby move on the screen and hearing the incredible sound of her beating heart. And I just lay there thinking, if I had had an abortion at the same time period, 5 or 6 months along, when I was 17 or 18, and I was now 28 years of age, very excited about starting our family, and seeing that sonogram for the first time and seeing the baby move, how would I feel? How would that impact my mental health? Late-term abortions especially have very real consequences on the physical and mental health of women, and many taxpayers are not comfortable funding these procedures for that reason. We can do better for mental health. And Madam Speaker, I move the amendment.
Floor Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, colleague, for your courage and bravery in sharing your personal story on the House floor. I think it's a true testament to, one, your character, and two, the important reason that we all do this work every day. So thank you for that. I also want to share that, one, I'm very glad that your pregnancy resulted in healthy children and that you are here today to share with us that story. So thank you. I empathize a lot with the words that you shared. I too had 2 high-risk pregnancies. One of them very sadly did not result in a live birth. And to this day, the sonogram still haunts me. And these are really tough words to share in front of our colleagues and our friends here in Annapolis. And what I'll say to this is that the reason I share this is to point out that every pregnancy is different. Some pregnancies start out healthy and perfect with a mother and a father or 2 parents rather, who are really excited and want nothing but a healthy child at the end. And sometimes things change, and the health of the mother or the baby could change. And sometimes those changes require a personal decision, a consultation between a mother, their care team, the family, to really make these difficult decisions of what's best for the individuals and the family who are ultimately going to be hopefully raising a healthy baby. These are all individual decisions. And the way that I read this amendment, and in my conversation briefly with my good colleague before offering, which thank you so much for sharing the language, the way that I read this amendment is that it would strike the ability of any woman who receives Medicaid from receiving abortion care services should the decision be related to her mental health. And that's a really tough decision for us to make here as legislators. Most of us here are not medical providers. Almost none of us here who are medical providers are in the room where these decisions have to be made. And I think for those who are medical providers, they would tell you straight that they can't make clinical decisions on behalf of other patients when they haven't had the ability to review a patient's record. We cannot, as a body, overturn 40 years of the state's record of supporting the individual rights of women to make these difficult decisions with their care team. We can't do that because every single pregnancy is different. And so with that, I would urge my colleagues to please resist the amendment respectfully. Thank you.
On the amendment, all in favor signify by saying aye. Oppose? Roll call.
Madam Speaker.
Clerk will take the call. The amendment fails.
Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from Washington County.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have an amendment at the desk. It's amendment number 883425/1.
Amendment number 1.
Each year, the CDC requests abortion data from the central health agencies for 50 states, the District of Columbia, and New York City. In 2020, the latest year available, 49 reporting areas provided this information to the CDC. The states of California, Maryland, and New Hampshire continue to not report abortion data to the CDC. This amendment would not expend $250,000 to the Maryland Department of Health until this department has issued a report to the budget committees that provides abortion data regarding all abortions performed in the state and not just Medicaid abortions, which are known. The amendment asks for certain demographic data on abortions performed in the state and specifically states that the report shall not include any personally identifiable information that could be used to identify either the patient or the physician. Funds would revert to the general fund if the report is not provided. I move the amendment.
Floor Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to my good friend who shared the text of the amendment before debate began. Thank you so much. Colleagues, you may recall similar language offered to our budget bill last year and the year prior, and maybe prior to that. This is an amendment that I know my good colleague and friend really believes in. And for those who are new, I would share a couple of points of why I would ask respectfully this body to resist this amendment. So first, although the language of the amendment specifies that no personally identifying information should be shared, much of the information that is required in the report as drafted in the amendment is very personal in nature and could potentially lead to patients or providers being identified. And the purpose of this is unclear. And while I believe that my good friend offers the amendment with nothing but good intention, the unintended consequence of a report like this is ultimately the likely additional intimidation that patients will receive as they are seeking the care that they need. Information including a patient's marital status is asked for in this report, their age, their race, where the facility, where this procedure has been done, the estimated gestational age of the fetus, the month during which the abortion was performed. These are highly specific details that, if revealed, could very, very likely, even despite the best intentions of my colleague, result to the identification of the patients and the providers who are providing these services. And so with that, I would respectfully ask that the body resist this amendment. Thank you.
Madam Speaker.
Yes. Gentlelady from Hartford.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Body, as it was mentioned earlier by the maker of this amendment is something that already exists in 95% of the other states, and it has not been an issue. And obviously that includes red and blue states, some deep red, some deep blue. This has not been an issue. And furthermore, our situation nationwide with abortion, as many states have sought to restrict it, sometimes almost wholesale, will lead to the movement of abortions around the country. There is no time more important than now for us to be tracking this kind of information. There is no time more important than now for us to have the data on who is coming here, why they are seeking abortions, where they are coming from. This is important information for public health policy, not just for those of us who have concerns about Maryland becoming this beacon of abortion tourism, but for those of you who are concerned with where the people are losing access and the impact that it's having on the state of Maryland. So I would really urge support of this amendment. This is information that is easy to de-identify. It's being done all over the country.
Floor Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to my good friend, former committee mate, for her remarks. And for pointing out that, yes, this is language that exists in other parts of the country. In many of those states, this report has been utilized to adversely impact and to intimidate and actually criminalize providers who are providing these services. The AG of Indiana is a great example of that, has used this report, this data, to actually go after providers who are providing services. So with that, again, I ask my colleagues here to please resist this amendment.
Madam Speaker.
Gentleman, again, we're still pushing.
Thank you.
Western Maryland.
It's interesting to note that those 49 other jurisdictions continue to report that information to the CDC. And the reason I ask for the amendment is that data is needed to make informed decisions and to be accountable to the taxpayers of Maryland. In its abortion surveillance report, the CDC includes a section titled Public Health Implications. That report states that ongoing surveillance of legal abortions is important for several reasons. These reasons include, and I quote, evaluating programs aimed at preventing unintended pregnancies, as 42% of unintended pregnancies end in abortion. Efforts to help women avoid unintended pregnancies might reduce the number of abortions, end of quote. And also in a later report, the CDC states, and again I quote, routine abortion surveillance is needed to assess trends in clinical practice patterns over time. Information in this report on the number of abortions performed through different methods and at different gestational ages provides the denominator data that are necessary for analysis of the relative safety of abortion practices. Finally, information on the number of pregnancies ending in abortion is needed in conjunction with data on births and fetal losses to estimate the number of pregnancies in the United States and determine rates for various outcomes of public health importance, for example, adolescent pregnancies, end of quote. The CDC goes on to say that multiple factors influence the incidence of abortion, including access to health care, contraception, state regulations, acceptance of non-marital childbearing, insufficient client-centered counseling, lack of youth-friendly services, low client awareness, and the economy. This amendment isn't about whether you're pro-life or you're pro-choice. It's about women's health and the ability to collect data to improve upon women's health. It's about having the information necessary to make informed decisions, to direct adequate services to the areas where they're needed the most. I press the amendment.
Any further debate? On the amendment, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? No.
Roll call.
Roll call.
Madam Speaker.
Clerk will take the call. The amendment fails.
Madam Speaker,
Gentleman from Western Maryland.
I have a second amendment at the desk. It is 303728/1.
Amendment number 1.
Similar to the previous amendment offered, this amendment requires the Maryland Department of Health to submit a report to the budget committees, but in a more limited fashion. This amendment requires reporting of the total number of third trimester abortions performed in the state. I believe that many of us are under the impression that abortions are not performed in Maryland beyond the 24 to 26 week period. However, we do not know, as again, this information is neither collected nor reported to the CDC. For these reasons, I move the amendment.
Floor Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you again to my colleague for providing the language of the amendment in advance of this discussion. So, colleagues, as our good friend here just shared, the language that he is requesting is very similar to the immediate prior amendment that was offered, however limited to third trimester abortions. As we've spoken about today in this very difficult discussion, oftentimes third trimester abortions are among the most difficult ones, where an individual is making a decision much later in their pregnancy, usually as a result of very personal factors that are outside of their control. And in the event that these procedures are occurring, these are, again, such difficult decisions for most women who are seeking them that we absolutely do not want them to feel pressure, additional intimidation potentially over a report language that, frankly, the Guttmacher Institute is already collecting such data at much less risk to the patients involved. And so with that, colleagues, I would respectfully request that you resist this amendment. Thank you.
Any further? Maker of the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I do have a March 2022 letter from the AG's office. It does state that Maryland law does not set any limit on the ability to terminate a pregnancy where certain requirements are met. For these reasons, I press the amendment.
Any further debate? On the amendment, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Roll call.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, clerk would take the call. The amendment fails. Yeah. Any additional amendments to the bill to its title? Hearing none. The bill is ordered printed for third reading. Special order calendar number.
Madam Speaker?
Yes.
Vote change.
What'd you say? Thank you. Oh, vote change? Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Vote change on House Bill 200, Amendment 603028 to green. Thank you.
Gentleman from Anne Arundel.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Same. House Bill 200, Amendment 603028/1 to green.
Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from Calvert.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Something in the water on this side. House Bill 200/603028/1 to green.
Any other vote changes? Again, special order calendar number 31. Clerk, read the bill.
House Bill 202, Budget Reconciliation and Financing Act of 2023. Favor the amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing the committee chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. With your permission, Madam Speaker, I will now turn to the amendments on House Bill 202, the BRFA, that have been adopted by the Appropriations Committee. I'd like to note that the amendments to the BRFA are often technical and needed to implement the appropriations actions that you just saw in the budget. Amendment moves so much be considered the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
Amendment number 1 is technical. Amendment number 2 adds a provision that provides flexibility and specializations for facilities being provided to certain medical centers. Amendment number 3 adds a provision that allows for full repayment of fiscal 23 local reserve account. Amendment number 4 adds a provision providing flexibility to the transfer of Bainbridge Naval Training Center. Amendment number 5 adds a provision to reduce funds for fiscal 23 due to lower caseloads. Amendment 6 adds a provision requiring a transfer of special funds be used for the existing natural gas infrastructure in that certain territory. Move the amendments.
Question for the House is the adoption of the committee amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The amendments have been adopted. Question now to adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The favorable report is adopted. General Lady from Carroll.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have an amendment at the desk, amendment number 923-020-1.
Amendment number 1.
Move so much be considered the reading of the amendment.
So ordered.
So this amendment is pretty simple. It would alter the full-time equivalent enrollment for state aid for education. Instead of simply counting students just in September, we would count them in September, December, March, and the last day in June. This is important for transparency, for accountability, for our fiscal dollars, but it's also important so that we know where our children are. If there's a child that is counted in September, but they're not there in December, it makes complete sense to me that we would be able to intervene in a much quicker fashion to find out if that family has need for services, if there's some assistance that could be given to help that student be back in school and to be successful. MSEA, PSAM, MABE, Strong Schools agree with me because in their testimony against this, which was actually a bill of mine this year, they agree that student attendance is essential for academic progress and success. And they believe that robust attendance requirements should be promoted whenever possible. When they agree, but then they're in opposition to doing just that, I don't understand that. I really think that this is a service that we can provide to our families and our children in a fiscally responsible way, but also to support the families and children of the state of Maryland. And for that reason, I push my amendment. Thank you.
Floor Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to the maker of the amendment for getting that to us in advance. So I just want to make sure everyone understands that our local education agencies, they count their enrollment September 30th, every year, and then they report those figures to MSDE. And then over time, there's some back and forth to ensure that that information is correct. As you probably may not know, some of these formulas can be a bit complex for school funding. There's about 10 different funding formulas that rely upon enrollment figures to make them work. And so what this bill does, it's going to be average of 4 different, this amendment proposes to do, is it averages the enrollment based on 4 dates, September, December, and I believe March, and then the end of the school year. The reason why we need a count in September is so that we can create a state budget that is effective July 1. So if we are getting counts from June, whatever, it's not workable. And I think it's also important for folks to know that, that the various entities like MABE that they testified in opposition to the very bill that was mentioned by the amendment maker. And in fact, that bill at issue, this body has voted down twice for the past couple of years. So I do request that you resist this amendment because it doesn't make the work of budgeting practical for us to deliver a state budget reflecting the enrollment of students. So thank you for listening, and I hope I can get your support in resisting this amendment.
The minority whip.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My good friend from Baltimore City, would you mind rising just for a couple questions, if that's okay?
Floor Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
What would be the downside to collecting enrollment data more than once a year?
As proposed in this amendment, it would be the average of 4 times And those times are so late. We have to deliver a budget before we get out of here in 90 days, right? So that's the average of a count in March and at the end of the school year. How can we use the result of that average to prepare the budget so that we can do it in the 90 days?
So would it be fair to say that the budget is for someone who's planning on attending for the entire year?
I'm sorry, could you repeat yourself?
I mean, would it be fair to say when we're putting this budget together, it's assuming that the students are there the entire time?
Yes.
So would it also be fair to say for the taxpayer purposes that we want to make sure that they actually are there the entire time? So for example, if we put a budget together saying that they're going to be there for the entire calendar year and they leave on October 1st, I mean, there's obviously a discrepancy, right?
Well, I can respond to that. As I noted earlier, though LEAs have to report that information to MSDE by September 30th, there's still ongoing back and forth between MSDE and the LEAs to ensure that they do have the most accurate data once they finalize the proposal. So despite what this amendment is attempting to do, it's not just what's delivered on September 30th that MSDE goes on. They continue to go back and forth with the LEAs to refine the data.
I mean, thank you very much.
No problem.
So I will just say this. I can't think of one bad reason to not pass this amendment. It's for accountability. It's to ensure that we're not leaving any students behind. It's for being fiscally prudent with taxpayer dollars. It's for parents to understand whether their kids have dropped out of school. I think it's a good amendment. It's reasonable. I can't imagine there would even be a fiscal note associated with it. It's just essentially counting the students to make sure that they're there. And I think that's something that all parents and all taxpayers in this state would appreciate, because we are increasing funding for students with the blueprint and other laws that we've passed. The least we can do is just confirm that the kids are there. So for all those reasons, I urge the body to support this amendment. Thank you.
Floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In fact, what you're proposing would increase the fiscal note and would not increase the accuracy or enable us to deliver. So for those reasons, I ask my colleagues to resist this amendment.
Maker of the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I appreciate the comments and discussion here, and I appreciate our minority whip, and I think he brings up a lot of good points. And I would certainly be amenable to amending the amendment if the end of June is too late. But I think that there's got to be a time where we change this process. It's not a good process. And I think that for all of those reasons, and for our children and for our families, I press the amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
On the amendment, all in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Roll call.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? So the clerk will take the call. The amendment fails. Are there any additional amendments to the The gentleman from Anne Arundel.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have an amendment at the desk, amendment number 483322.
Amendment number 1.
Move so much to be considered reading the amendment.
So ordered.
This amendment would withhold 10% of the baseline formula funding for schools with a report card score of 2 stars or less from the Maryland State Department of Education for 2 consecutive years. Colleagues, I gave a speech on the floor a couple weeks ago about encourage and discourage, and once again, we're back to that, in my opinion. Just about every bill or piece of legislation we pass through this body is designed to encourage certain behavior or discourage certain behavior. In economic matters, we often pass bills for tax credits, tax cuts, to encourage businesses or encourage people to stay here in the state of Maryland. In health and government operations, we pass bills to encourage better health. In judiciary, they do a lot more discouraging, to discourage people from committing crimes or being repeat offenders, to encourage a safer society. Now, I understand that those lines get blurred, and that's where debate comes from. They get blurred at my house. My wife will often
encouraged me to help her pick out an outfit. And I am discouraged. There are many people listening to me right now encouraging me to hurry up because they're Terp fans. But one thing we should be encouraging, all of us should be encouraging excellence. Excellence, or at least success, especially when it comes to the education of our children, of our future in this state. But we don't take that step. We assume it's going to change on its own. I understand change is not a four-letter word. The reaction to it often is, because it's hard. It's hard to make it change. But when we see things like this, we know we have to make a change. Let me tell you what it means to get out of two-star rating. 30% of your students have to be proficient in English, 25% in math, 30% in science, and at least 75% of your students cannot be chronically absent. We need to encourage these schools to do better, and I know that there's measures in place, even in Kerwin, to have these schools do better, but it's not through money. Money is a great motivator. If you don't believe me, go ask to borrow some from somebody in here. We need to put some teeth behind what we do in here so that we can, as a body, demand excellence. And this is not about one area of this state. I looked, 14 different counties in the city all have at least one school 2 stars or below. That's a travesty for some of these students. And believe me, this is not about cutting funding for the teachers. I looked it up on MSDE today. If you look at the numbers, we actually have a 15-to-1 student-to-teacher ratio in this state. The average teacher is paid $75,000 per year. Back of the napkin math, that's $250,000 per classroom. And we're paying the teacher $75,000. I never blame the teacher. My wife has worked in the Prince George's County school system for 20 years. I know how hard it is. But I will tell you there's a lot of waste. And that waste will continue unless we start to demand excellence and success. And the only way to do that at times is through waking them up by cutting some of the funding. If they react and improve, the funding continues. All I'm asking is with this amendment, we encourage excellence. With that, I push the amendment, Madam Speaker.
On the amendment, all in favor? Oh, I'm sorry. Floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I too am a bit anxious, so I share your sentiments. Thank you to the maker of the amendment for getting that to us in advance. I greatly appreciate it. And I think we all share your sentiments that we want to ensure that the education we deliver to Marylanders, that we don't just deliver it, that we're evaluating it and we're holding, institutions accountable to what they deliver. So what your proposal would do would to take funds away from schools that most likely need it the most. And so what we did when we passed the Blueprint for Maryland's Future, we did stand up an accountability implementation board and an entire set of protocols so that when we see schools that are struggling, we're able to dispatch experts and teams that can evaluate what's happening at that school, what is triggering some of the deficits, and how they can provide coaching, support, and other materials so that those schools can continue to grow and become better in quality. And so I also want to encourage you with some of the things we already passed right here in the blueprint with the AIB. It actually is effective fiscal year 23. The AIB, there's a 25% increase above the state share that we're providing to all the local districts. And starting in fiscal year 23, AIB holds that money back until the LEAs actually provide their implementation plan. So there's already an accountability metric that we as a body have supported, and that is that's in effect right now. So I wanted to encourage you with that information should you not be aware, and also let you know that we want to ensure that when we're tackling these problems, that we're not doing things that might feel good but don't ultimately help those schools become as strong and as productive as we want them to be for our young people. So thank you so much for your concern about accountability. We're already moving into that direction with the AIB, and for those reasons, I request that my colleagues resist this amendment. Thank you.
Maker of the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'll make it quick. I encourage all of you to really think about this and what is the best way to encourage excellence. And with that, I push the amendment, Madam Speaker.
On the amendment, all in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Roll call.
Madam Speaker.
Clerk will take the call. The amendment fails. Are there any other amendments to the bill to its title? Hearing none, bill is ordered printed for third reading.
Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from St. Mary's.
Thank you. I got up in time. A vote change for House Bill 200, Amendment 603028 from red to green, please.
Report of the Committee on Environment and Transportation, report number 7. Clerk will read the first bill.
House Bill 9, Equity in Transportation Sector Guidelines and Analysis. Favorable amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Moves must be considered the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
As amended, HB 9 requires that beginning July 1st, 2024, MTA must conduct a transit equity analysis, a transit ADA analysis, perform a cost-benefit analysis, and consult with members and leaders of affected communities before announcing any service change that would constitute a major service change under federal law, any reduction or cancellation of a capital expansion project, and the construction program and the CTP that exceeds thresholds developed by MTA. Amendment number 1, for major service changes and reduced or canceled capital expansion projects, require a transit equity analysis under the federal ADA to determine whether the change will create disparate impact on disabled persons. Amendment number 2 adds a member of the transportation construction industry to the advisory committee on state transportation goals. Amendment number 3 also alters the standards for evaluating transportation indicators. Move the amendments.
The question for the House is the adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Amendments have been adopted. The question now is adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read next bill.
House Bill 34, Failure to Pay Rent Proceedings, Prohibition on Rent Increases, and Sealing of Court Records. Favorable amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move so much be the reading of the amendment.
So ordered.
As amended, the bill generally requires a district court within 60 days after a final resolution of a failure to pay a rent proceeding that did not result in a judgment of possession to shield all related court records. The bill also authorizes the court to shield all court records relating to failure to pay a rent proceeding that results in a judgment of possession on motion of a tenant, and if specified requirements are met. In addition, the bill prohibits a landlord from increasing the rent solely because of a judgment that was entered against the tenant in a failure to pay rent action. Amendment number 1 is technical. Amendment number 2 provides for an applicability of certain prohibitions under the bill. Amendment number 3 provides for a shielding rather than a sealing of certain court records associated with the failure to pay rent action, alters the standard for shield certain records and open shielding records under certain circumstances. It also provides if a judgment for possession is entered in a proceeding in which the tenant asserted rent escrow as a defense, that the district court may shield only the court records related to the judgment for possession. It also provides that in order to shield court records may not affect the action in which the appeal is pending and alters the contents of a certain form required under the bill. Amendment number 4 provides for prospective application of certain provisions of the bill. Move the amendments, Madam Speaker.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed?
Madam Speaker.
John Lady from Baltimore County.
Thank you so much. Will the floor leader rise, please?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much. So I'm reading the bill, and it looks like there's a lot of opposition testimony. Did any of the amendments address their opposition?
The opposition that you saw in the on the floor system, thank you, was primarily from persons that signed up for opposition with no testimony. The other opposition that you saw in the bill was the Maryland Multiple Housing Association, and in the amendments that I just read to you, those situations, those objections were met in the amendments.
How about the Maryland Judiciary? They were opposed.
Very good, very good. Thank you for reminding me. The Maryland Judiciary had an opposition in the very beginning. We had a very, very lengthy meeting with the Judiciary, and their concerns were also addressed in the amendments.
How about the Maryland Building Industry Association?
Also taken care of.
So all of them are now in support of this, or are they holding their nose? We did not receive anything stating that they were in support after we submitted and put in their amendments. So they could still be opposed?
The amendments that I just offered are their amendments.
They're their amendments from all of those groups I just mentioned?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, well, thank you for that, and I'll do my homework and make comments on third reader. Thank you so much, Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from Baltimore County.
Madam Speaker, while the floor leader's standing, I'd like to ask him a few questions. From what I'm understanding from this bill is that they will shield records for landlords that if want to look into someone's past history, if they fail to pay rent. Am I correct?
Let me see if I can understand your question. Let me do this instead. Instead of me attempting to identify what your question is, why don't I just tell you what the shielding is meant to take care of? In a possession, judgment for possession, if there is no warrant of restitution and if the judgment of possession is dismissed or taken care of by the court system, then that is shielded. Okay. That judgment is shielded. Does that answer your question?
Partially. The question I have is, so what you're saying is if I go down and get a warrant of restitution to have a tenant removed, if that tenant moves out and there's no further actions taken, you're saying that will be shielded?
This is what has to happen. It may be shielded if the tenant files for a shielding, and then the judge has to make a decision whether to shield it or not. It may be. It doesn't happen automatically. It may be, but it has to go to the court system first.
All right, my concerns are that if you're going to start shielding these type of procedures, as landlords and people that are represented landlords, how are they going to be able to judge whether they want to rent to these people? I think this is disenfranchising a lot of people, because now what will they go by? Their credit score? And thinking about that, a lot of people that are renting, their credit score is not that great. So how are we going to determine who we want to rent to? You know, if someone's been evicted 4 or 5 times, you know, that's up to the landlord whether they want to rent to that particular party. But if they don't have that information, how can they make a decision? And that's where I'm coming from.
If they've been evicted, this doesn't apply.
Okay, failure to pay rent, I'm sorry. If they weren't evicted, but they did have multiple failure to pay rent, and
if those failure to pay rent judgments were cured, okay? If they were cured, then the tenant could file for shielding.
But doesn't, okay, I'll talk to you offline. Thank you. I still have some concerns that this could basically disenfranchise some people. Thank you.
Minority Whip.
Madam Speaker, what just seems to be a few questions and concerns. Would it be possible just to special order the bill till the appropriate time tomorrow, just to maybe come up with some questions and a possible amendment?
Madam Speaker.
I have to adopt the amendments
Perfect.
because people popped up prior to when they're supposed to. So, but do you have something? Yeah, go ahead. Let me adopt the amendments, okay? Because you didn't, respond to that. A question for the House is the adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Amendments have been adopted.
Madam Speaker.
Question? Excuse me?
Oh, I thought they were adopted.
Huh? What was that? I haven't done the... I was about to do that. You cut me off. Okay. The question now is adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Recognizing Chair of the Committee.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'll accept a special order until the afternoon session.
Okay.
I move to special order the bill until the second session, to the appropriate time in the second session.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The bill has been special ordered to the second session. Clerk, read the next bill.
House Bill 289, Maryland Forestry Education Fund Establishment. Favor of the amendments. Amendment number 1.
Madam Speaker.
Recognizing the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So much be considered the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
House Bill 289, as amended, establishes the Maryland Forestry Education Fund, a special fund administered by the Maryland Forestry Foundation. Amendment number 1 adds sponsors, and amendment number 2 limits the mandated appropriation to fiscal years 2025 and 2026. Move the amendments.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The amendments have been adopted. The question now is adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Seeing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 503, Natural Resources Green Space Equity Program Establishment. Favorable. With amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing the floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move so much be considered the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
This bill establishes a green space equity program in the Department of Natural Resources to provide grants to eligible applicants to enhance the public health and livability of overburdened communities and underserved communities. Amendment number 1 adds co-sponsors and makes technical changes. Amendment number 2 adds language specifying up to certain amounts of money from program open space, state share, may be transferred to the program, clarifies relevant definitions, makes technical and clarifying changes regarding the administration of the program, and establishes requirements for converting land acquired by a grant award, adds language to ensure public access to land developed or improved under a grant. Move the amendment.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The amendment has been adopted. The question now is adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 819, Montgomery County off-street parking requirements near mass transit stations. Favorable.
Question for the House is adoption of the favorable report. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 950, Maryland Native Plants Program. Favor the amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing the floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. May so much be considered the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
Amendment number 1 adds co-sponsors and makes technical changes. Amendment number 2 transfers primary responsibility for administering the program from the University of Maryland Extension to the Maryland Department of Agriculture. It authorizes the inclusion of cultivars and hybrids of native plants in the commercial Maryland native plants list under certain circumstances, and establishes a $250,000 mandatory appropriation to support the program. Move the amendments.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Amendments have been adopted. Question now is adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 983, Hunting, Wildlife Conservation, and Outdoor Recreation Funding, Promotion, Management, Licenses, Permits, and Stamps. Favorable amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing the floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move so much the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
All right, this bill is amended, HB 983, increases fees for several hunting license stamps and permits, establishes a resident and non-resident sick of deer stamp and related fees, and authorizes qualified non-resident college or university students to purchase a resident hunting license. The committee amendments strike the migratory game bird hunting on Sundays, alter the scope of the required plan to address deer overpopulation in the state, and create a fund to cost share program for farmers to plant forage crops. Move the amendments.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The amendments have been adopted. The question now is to adopt the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Recognizing the gentlelady from Hartford.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just have a few questions about this bill, if the floor leader might indulge me.
Floor leader.
All right.
Thank
Good
you,
morning.
sir. Good morning. So I see at the bottom here, there's been some stricken language on the last page. Sorry, not the last page. On page 11. I'm just wondering if it's the exceptions for Sunday hunting, Baltimore City, Baltimore County, Howard, Prince George's. Does that just appear somewhere else in the bill, or?
Well, that's actually removed from the bill.
Okay,
now.
so what does that mean? So are those places going to be allowed to Sunday hunt? Yes or no?
No.
They're not going to be allowed to. Okay, and then can you just touch on the migratory bird thing? Where does that primarily affect? Who wanted that, and who's it going to impact?
I can't quite hear you. Could you speak a little bit clearer?
Oh, the migratory bird piece that you mentioned was stricken from the bill. Who's that affecting? Is that already legal?
It hasn't been legal in 300 years to hunt migratory waterfowl on Sundays.
Okay, so this was going to be a new change to our policy?
No.
If you had had it in there?
If this bill had passed with that provision, it would be a change.
Okay, I understand. Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other debate? Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 1006, State Highway Administration Vegetation Management Pollinator Habitat Plan. Favorable.
Question for the House is adoption of the favorable report. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The favorable report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 1084, Natural Resources, Oyster Inspection and Severance Taxes Increase. Favorable amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Be so much considered the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As amended, the bill increases the severance tax from $1 per per bushel to $2 per bushel that is levied on every bushel of oysters caught within the limits of the natural oyster bars of the state exclusive of the Potomac River. The bill also increases the inspection tax from 30 cents per bushel to $1 per bushel that is levied on marketable oysters shipped in the shell to any place outside the state. The bill also requires that $1 of every 2 of the severance tax collected be distributed to the county oyster committees in specified counties. Amendment number 1 strikes the obsolete seed and shell oyster replanting program from the law, and amendment number 2 corrects an oversight by adding the Baltimore County Oyster Committee to the list of county oyster committees that may use certain funds for oyster bar repletion. Move the amendment.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The amendments have been adopted. Question now is adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill as to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Report of the Committee on Health and Government Operations, report number 7. Clerk will read the first bill.
House Bill 121, Mental Health Treatment Plans for Individuals and Facilities. Requirements. Favor of the amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing the floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move so much be considered the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
Amendment number 1 adds sponsors and makes technical changes. Amendment number 2 requires facilities to provide a schedule of team meetings where a plan of treatment is discussed and establishes a process for the authorized individual to participate in those team meetings. Provides for the circumstances when a treating provider may withhold information on a treatment plan from a family member. Alters the process to be followed by a facility when communicating the results for review and reassessment of a treatment plan. Strikes the Office of Administrative Hearings review from the bill and instead requires facilities to provide referral information for the resident grievance system under certain circumstances. Authorizes certain individuals to appeal reconsiderations to the Department of Healthcare Systems Chief Medical Officer and requires the department to report on the report grievance system. Move the amendments.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The amendments have been adopted. The question now is adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 260, Maryland Sign Language Interpreters Act. Favor of the amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing the floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Be so much we consider the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
Amendment number 1 is technical and adds co-sponsors. Amendment number 2 requires the Office of Deaf and Hard of Hearing to include in its annual report a report on the activities of the board, including the number of licensed sign language and interpreters and the number of complaints received, differentiated by the type of complaint. It also corrects a typo in the bill and requires the Maryland Judiciary to report to committees on its use of interpreters for 3 years beginning January 1, 2026. I move the amendments.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Amendments have been adopted. The question now is adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 274, Task Force on Reducing Emergency Department Wait Times. Favor of the amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing the floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move so much be considered the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
Amendment number 1 adds sponsors and makes technical changes. Amendment number 2 adds members to the task force, requires the Maryland Institute for Emergency Medical Service Systems to staff the task force, and requires the task force to identify root causes of wait times in emergency departments, coordinate with other state commissions, review studies and recommendations on addressing workforce capacity, conduct an analysis of reimbursement policies, and make recommendations including legislative, regulatory, or other policy initiatives. Move the amendments.
Question for the House is adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 863, Public Health, Chief Medical Examiner, corrections to autopsy findings and conclusions. Favorable.
Question for the House is the adoption of the favorable report. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The favorable report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 962, Physicians and Allied Health Professions Reorganization and Revisions. Favorable.
Question for the House is the adoption of the favorable report. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Report of the Committee on Health and Government Operations, report number 8. Clerk will read first bill.
House Bill 283, Maryland Medical Assistance Program, Gender Affirming Treatment, Trans Health Equity Act. Favorable amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move so much be considered the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
Amendment number 1 adds sponsors. Amendment number 2 authorizes each health care provider offering gender affirming treatment with which an MCO has an active contract to consent to being included in a certain report or to be publicly listed as part of the department's annual report. Move the amendments.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The amendments have been adopted. Question now is adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Recognizing the gentleman from Carroll.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I do have an amendment at the desk. It's amendment number 0283/543322/1.
Amendment number 1.
Move so much be considered the reading of the amendment, Madam Speaker.
So ordered.
I was talking to my friends across the aisle recently. I know I don't have many of them, but HB, oh, that's right. HB 283, Gender Affirming Treatment, Trans Health Equity Act. We're talking about this bill. And I think there are a lot of misconceptions and misunderstandings about what the bill does. The bill expands gender-affirming surgeries and irreversible puberty blockers for children. Here's what the bill says. And to the extent that the Speaker wants and feels it's appropriate, you know, this is what the bill says. It has to be read, though. And there are minors in the chamber. I'm not sure if it's appropriate for them to leave the chamber.
That's your call. That's your call. That's your call. That's your call. Just go ahead and read the bill.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that, Madam Speaker. The bill says, gender affirming treatment includes hormone therapy, hormone blockers, and puberty blockers. Alterations to voice therapy, voice lessons, alterations to abdomen, chest, trunk, and buttocks, alteration to the face and neck, alterations to the genitals and gonads, laser treatment from scars from gender affirming treatment for children. The sole purpose of the bill is to expand treatment of gender affirming care, if you will, to individuals 18 years of age and younger. and the taxpayer pays for it. The amendment I am proposing is very reasonable, and I'm hoping the committee considers it a friendly amendment. It's very simple. It limits gender-affirming surgeries and puberty blockers to individuals 18 years and older. This is a serious bill. We should take time to educate ourselves on this bill and see what it actually says since it has been amended. And there's so many other bills on the floor, and I know that it takes a lot of time to read these bills. This is one that should be read. My understanding is that today is the 65th day. So pursuant to Rule 53 on page 45 of the rule book, I respectfully request this bill be laid over so the committee can consider the amendment and the members can read the bill. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Is this gentleman supported?
We need 4 people to stand, please.
Bill's laid over until tomorrow.
Thank
Clerk will
you.
read next bill.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
House Bill 456, Pharmacies, Prescription Drugs, Accessible Labels for Blind, Visually Impaired, and Print Disabled Individuals. Favor the amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing the floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move so much be considered the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Amendment number 1 is technical and adds co-sponsors. Amendment number 2 strikes the bill as introduced and instead requires the State Board of Pharmacy to adopt regulations necessary to ensure that individuals who are blind, visually impaired, or otherwise print disabled have appropriate access to prescription labels, bag tags, and medical guides. Requires the board to give visually impaired individuals an opportunity to provide input on the regulations. These regulations must be adopted by January 1, 2025. And on or before December 1st, 2023, the Maryland Department of Health shall submit a report on the potential process for and cost of implementing enhanced professional dispensing fees for providing accessible labels and compliant packaging to blind, visually impaired, and otherwise print disabled individuals. Move the amendments.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Amendments have been adopted. Question now is adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read next bill.
House Bill 596, Health and Human Services Transportation Improvement Act of 2023. Favorable amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing the floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So be considered reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
Amendment number 1 makes technical changes. Adds sponsors. Amendment number 2 strikes the establishment of the rural non-emergency medical transportation program. Move the amendments.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The amendments have been adopted. The question now is adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Seeing none. The bill is ordered printed for third reading. That's all. Clerk will read next bill.
House Bill 626, Animal Testing and Research, Human Relevant Research Funding, and Animal Testing and Research Licensure. Favorable amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing the floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move so much be considered the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
Amendment number 1 makes technical changes. Amendment number 2 strikes the prohibition on using non-human animals to conduct research in the state unless licensed by the Secretary of Health, and instead requires certain research entities to provide a contribution to MDH based on the number of animals on which the entity performs research, strikes the requirement for Institutional Review Board approval to receive a grant or loan, and provides that a research entity that does not pay the contribution required under this bill may be subject to a specified civil fine. Move the amendments.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The amendments is adopted. Amendments are adopted. The question now is the adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 690, Maryland African American Museum Corporation Board of Directors, membership. Favorable amendments. Amendment number 1.
Madam Speaker.
Recognizing the floor leader.
Thank you. Move so much to be considered the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
Amendment number 1, as co-sponsors. Amendment number 2, adds that the corporation add 1 member to the Senate and from the Senate and 1 member from the House. And please move the amendments, Madam Speaker.
Question for the House is adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The amendments have been adopted. The question now is the adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 717, State Board of Nursing Peer Advisory Committee, scopes of practice and licensure requirements. Favorable amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing the floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move so much be considered the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
Amendment number 1 adds co-sponsors. Amendment number 2 makes technical changes, clarifies the definition of a certified medication technician regarding the task performed by a CMT, and the definition of a certified nursing assistant to clarify that practice is subject to regulations adopted by the Board of Nursing, and clarifies the education required for an individual to be exempt from requirements to be a licensed certified midwife. Move the amendments.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Amendments have been adopted. The question now is the adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read next bill.
House Bill 809, State Procurement Minority Business Enterprise Program, extension and reports. Favorable amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing the floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move so much be considered the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
Amendment number 1 is technical. It adds co-sponsors. Amendment number 2 makes a technical correction regarding the extension of the report regarding offshore wind projects and extends the authorizations and deadlines related to the state's MBE program. Move the amendments.
Question before the House is the adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The amendments have been adopted. Question now is adoption of favorable reports as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read next bill.
House Bill 811, hospitals, overdoses, testing for fentanyl. Favorable amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognize the floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move so much be considered the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
Amendment number 1 adds sponsors, alters the title of the bill, and makes technical changes. Amendment number 2 strikes the requirement that a hospital treating an individual with a known overdose conduct a rapid urine drug test for the presence of fentanyl. Requires the hospital to report de-identified test results to MDH through the state designated health information exchange, and clarifies the immunity provisions. Move the amendments.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The amendments have been adopted. The question now is adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read next bill.
House Bill 816, procurement minority business enterprises and veteran-owned small business enterprises, participation goals scorecard. Favorable amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing the floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move so much be considered the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
Amendment number 1 is technical and adds co-sponsors. Amendment number 2 strikes the requirement that the scorecard include MBE sub-goals, requires the scorecard to include a grading scale developed by GOSPA as a weighted scale that includes each unit's contribution towards meeting the statewide MBE goal and VSBE goal, and requires the scorecard to be posted on GOSPA's website. GOSPA must submit the information posted on its website to the General Assembly within 30 days. Move the amendments.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The amendments have been adopted. The question now is adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered, printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
House Bill 817, State Government Regulation Procedures and the Maryland Register. Favor of the amendments. Number 1.
Recognizing the floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move so much to be considered the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
Amendment number 1 is technical and adds co-sponsors, and amendment number 2 requires any regulation with a change to be resubmitted rather than only changes in which the text will differ substantially, and requires DO-IT rather than DSD to develop and maintain the electronic filing system. Move the amendments.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The amendments have been adopted. The question now is to adopt the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Report of the Committee on Health and Government Operations. Report number 9. Clerk will read the first bill.
House Bill 869, Department of the Environment, Study on Death Care and Funeral Practices. Favor of the amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing the floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move so much be considered the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
Thank you. Amendment number 1 adds sponsors. Amendment number 2 strikes provisions in the bill that require the study to include a certain analysis. Move the amendments.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The amendments have been adopted. The question now is the adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 977, Maryland Department of Health, Office of the Chief Medical Examiner. Favor of the amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing the floor leader.
Madam Speaker, move so much be considered the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
Amendment number 1 is just simply changes sponsors and makes technical changes. Move the amendment.
The question before the House is the adoption of the amendment. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The amendments have been adopted. The question now is adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 1051, Public Information Act, Decisions of the State Public Information Act Compliance Board Appeals. Favor of the amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing the floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move so much be considered the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
Amendment number 1 is technical and adds co-sponsors. Amendment number 2 clarifies that both requesters and custodians have the right to appeal from the Public Information Act Compliance Board decisions in appropriate circumstances. Move the amendment.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The amendment is adopted. Question now is adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 1146, Maryland Medical Assistance Program, Adult and Pediatric Dental Services, Review of Reimbursement Rates. Favor of amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Amendment number 1 adds sponsors and makes technical changes. Amendment number 2 strikes the bill and instead requires the Maryland Department of Health, in consultation with the Maryland Hospital Association, to conduct a specified survey of hospitals, requires MDH and the Maryland Healthcare Commission to conduct a regional needs assessment for dental procedures that requires anesthesia or moderate sedation, and requires MDH and the MHCC develop regional plans to ensure the availability of appropriate operating room space for the performance of dental procedures for Medicaid recipients. On or before December 1st, 2023, MDH and MHCC must report on the results of the survey, needs assessment, and regional plans. Move the amendments. Thank you.
Those amendments that were so ordered. Okay. The question for the House is the adoption of the amendment. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The amendments have been adopted. Question now is adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 1149, Medicaid Waiver Programs, Wait List and Registry Reduction, and the WAIT Act. Favorable amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing the floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move so much to be considered the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
Amendment number 1 adds sponsors and makes technical changes. Amendment number 2 requires a portion of the funds to be used to provide community services to individuals waiting for services through specified waivers, and that a portion of those funds may be used for the purpose of expanding provider capacity in the waivers, including hiring and retaining staff. Move the amendments.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The amendments have been adopted. Question now is adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 1151, Health Insurance Reimbursement for Services Rendered by a Pharmacist. Favorable amendments. Amendment number 1.
Madam Speaker,
Recognizing the floor leader.
move so much be considered the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
Amendment number 1, its sponsor. Amendment number 2 modifies an insurance-related provision in the bill to reflect that the intent is to require reimbursement of pharmacists for services that are covered under the policy or contract, and not to create new mandate for services, and delays the implementation date of the requirement on health insurance carriers to January 1st, 2024. Move the amendment, Madam Speaker.
The question for the House is the adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Amendments have been adopted. The question now is adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? All right. Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 1156, Pharmacist Therapy Management Contract Form. Favorable amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Amendment number 1 is technical and adds co-sponsors. Amendment number 2 requires a therapy management contract entered into orally to be reduced to writing within 30 days after entering into the contract. Move the amendments.
The question for the House is the adoption of the amendment. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The amendments have been adopted. The question now is adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 1159, State Board of Dental Examiners, University of Maryland School of Dentistry, faculty qualifying for examination. Favorable amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing the floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move so much to be considered the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
Thank you. Amendment number 1 adds co-sponsors. Amendment number 2 authorizes a faculty member trained at a foreign dental school to be qualified by the board to take the ADEX if the applicant is a general dentist who has successfully completed a general dentistry practice residency or advanced education in general dentistry program and is board certified by the American Board of General Dentistry. Move the amendments.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Amendments have been adopted. Question now is adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 1160, Maryland Pathway to Nursing Program and Advisory Committee Establishment. Favorable amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing the floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move so much the consideration of reading the amendments.
So ordered.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Amendment number 1 adds co-sponsors. Amendment number 2 requires regulations adopted by the Secretary to include a requirement that program participants sign an agreement that they intend to participate in the state for at least 2 years. Adds a representative from the Department of Labor to the committee and requires the committee to submit a report on or before December 1st, 2024 on whether licensed practical nurses education programs that meet educational program requirements under Title VIII of the Health Occupations article may be eligible for federal and state funding related to apprenticeship programs. Madam Speaker, move the amendments.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The amendments have been adopted. Question now is the adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Report of the Committee on Judiciary, report number 10. Clerk will read the first bill.
House Bill 135, Controlled Dangerous Substances, Volume Dealers and Drug Kingpins, Cannabis. Favorable amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing the Vice Chair of the Committee.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move so much be considered the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
Amendment number 1 is technical. Amendment number 2 increases the maximum penalties under the bill for volume dealing in cannabis and being a drug kingpin with regard to cannabis to 10 and 20 years respectively. It authorizes a person who is serving a mandatory minimum sentence imposed on or before a certain date for volume dealing in crack cocaine or cannabis or being a drug kingpin with regard to crack cocaine or cannabis to file a motion to modify or reduce the sentence. It increases maximum penalties for certain firearm crimes. It authorizes a person who is at least 21 years or older to manufacture a personal use amount of cannabis products or concentrated cannabis for personal use or adult sharing at a private residence if the manufacturing process does not involve the use of a volatile solvent. Move the amendments.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The amendments have been adopted. Question now is adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Recognizing the Minority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would like to, you just read the amendments, my friend, the Vice Chair. There's a lot about cannabis and guns and crack cocaine in the bill. There's a lot of things going on there. I've had a conversation with the Chair of the Judiciary Committee. Would it be possible to special order the bill until tomorrow for the purposes of amendment so we have an opportunity to review all of this complex bill?
Certainly.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the
Question for the House is the special order HB 135 to the appropriate time tomorrow. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The bill has been special ordered. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 223, Criminal Procedure, Facial Recognition Technology, Requirements, Procedures, and Prohibitions. Favorable amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing the Vice Chair of the Committee.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move so much we consider the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
Amendment number 1 adds sponsors. Amendment number 2 adds crimes that facial recognition technology may be used to investigate, and it strikes a prohibition against analyzing images of certain juveniles. Amendment number 3 strikes a provision restricting images that may be used for comparison purposes and adds items that the state must disclose during discovery. Amendment number 4 strikes a proficiency testing requirement. It transfers the responsibility for adopting a statewide policy regarding facial recognition technology from the Department of Public Safety and Corrections to the State Police. and it requires the Department of Public Safety and Corrections to develop and administer a training program. Amendment number 5 requires a law enforcement agency that contracts for use of a non-government facial recognition system to disclose on its public website the name of the system and a description of the database search, and it modifies the reporting requirements. Move the amendments.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The amendments have been adopted. Question now is the adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Favorable report. The ayes have it. The favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 267, Family Law, Custody and Visitation, Notice of Intent to Travel, Maryland Child Abduction Prevention Act. Favorable amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing the floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move so much be considered the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
Amendment number 1 adds sponsors. Amendment number 2 is technical. Amendments 3, 4, and 5 strike language relating to a parent's notice of intent to travel and substitute language specifying the factors that a court must consider in determining whether there is a credible risk of abduction of a child. 2, specifying the contents of an abduction prevention order under the bill. And 3, providing for the issuance of an ex parte warrant for physical custody of the child when there is a credible risk of abduction. Move the adoption of the amendments, Madam Speaker.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The amendments have been adopted. Question now is adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 440, Child Custody, Relocation of Child, Expedited Hearing, Assurance of Child Safety Act. Favorable amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing the floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move so much be considered the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
Amendment number 1 adds sponsors. Amendment number 2 is technical. Amendment number 3 requires an expedited hearing where proposed relocation would significantly interfere with the parenting time schedule rather than when the relocation would be of 40 or more miles, and strikes from the bill a restriction on the court considering certain evidence in making a custody determination after a relocation. Move the amendments.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The amendments have been adopted. Question now is adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 758, Sexual Assault Evidence Collection Kits, Preservation and Storage. Favorable amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing the floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move so much be considered the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
Amendment number 1 adds sponsors. Amendment number 2 is technical. Amendment number 3 alters the definitions in the bill, removes references to healthcare providers and hospitals and certain provisions, and strikes language relating to sexual assault kits in the custody of persons other than law enforcement personnel. Amendment number 4 adds uncodified language providing for the retention and transfer of a sexual assault evidence collection kit collected before January 1, 2000 and stored by a hospital or child advocacy center, and requires the Maryland Sexual Assault Evidence Kit Policy and Funding Committee to issue a certain report regarding guidelines for transfer of certain sexual assault evidence kits and guidance on the use of self-administered sexual assault evidence kit collection kit. Move the adoption of the amendment.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendment. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Excuse me? I thought it says question adoption in favorable report. Say it again? Okay. Question now is the adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill as to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read next bill.
House Bill 800, execution on a judgment, child support arrearages, workers' compensation. Favorable amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing the gentleman from Baltimore County.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move so much be considered the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
Amendment number 1 adds sponsors. Amendment number 2 strikes language relating to the construction of the bill relative to the Federal Consumer Credit Protection Act. Move the amendments.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendment. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The amendments have been adopted. Question now is adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 980, criminal procedure, probation, parole, and pretrial release violations, cannabis use. Favorable amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing the chair of the committee.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move so much be the reading of amendments.
So ordered.
Amendment number 1 is technical. Amendment number 2 specifies that a court or the parole commission may not revoke a defendant's pretrial release or find that a defendant has violated probation or parole based solely on cannabis use, unless the court or parole commission at the time ordering pretrial release, probation, or parole makes a specific finding of danger and includes as a condition of the pretrial release, probation, or parole that the defendant may not use cannabis. Move the amendments.
The question before the House is the adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The amendments have been adopted. Question now is adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Report of the Committee on Judiciary, report number 11. Clerk will read the first bill.
House Bill 362, intercepted communications penalty. Favorable.
Question for the House is the adoption of the favorable report. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 759, Governor's Office of Crime Prevention, Youth and Victim Services, Sexual Assault Evidence Collection Kit Reporting Program. Favorable.
Question for the House is the adoption of the favorable report. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 1190, Juveniles Truancy Reduction Pilot Program Expansion. Favorable.
Question for the House is the adoption of the favorable report. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Report of the Committee on Judiciary, report number 12. Clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 1071, Criminal Procedure, Reasonable Suspicion, and Probable Cause, Cannabis. Favorable amendments. Number 1.
Madam Speaker.
Recognizing the chair of the committee.
Move so much be the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
Amendment number 1 is technical. Amendment number 2 alters maximum fees for smoking cannabis in a public place. Amendment number 3 prohibits a law enforcement officer from initiating a stop or a search of a person, motor vehicle, or vessel based solely on the odor of cannabis or other factors. Prohibits a law enforcement officer from conducting a search of a certain area of a motor vehicle or vessel when investigating a person for driving under the influence of cannabis, and specifies that the exclusionary rule applies to the bill. Move the amendments.
Move the amendments. Question for the House is the adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The amendments have been adopted. Question now is adoption of favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill to its title? Recognizing the minority leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would my friend, the committee chair, just rise out a question? You just said something, one of the amendments I might be getting wrong. I was trying to pay close attention. You said something about it would prohibit a law enforcement officer from searching, I think you said an area or a compartment of a vehicle in a DWI arrest. Am I getting that right, or do you know at least what I'm referring to? Maybe you can explain it to me better.
Yes, in the bill, what effectively is being drafted and has been drafted into the bill are the same rules for the search that a police officer is allowed to do if somebody's driving under the influence of alcohol. It equates that to the driving under the influence of cannabis. So if a police officer observes someone that they believe was driving under the influence of cannabis, it allows them to search basically within the cabin of the vehicle, just as they would be able to for driving under the influence of alcohol.
But not, say, the trunk or something.
Not the
that
trunk
SUV.
or something else.
Is it, and this may or may never happen, but if you stopped someone that you believed, was speeding, whatever it was, you approached them, you detected what you believed to be signs of, I don't know if intoxication is the right word, but being under the influence of cannabis, and you then detected the odor coming from a trunk area, or coming from, let's say you had a drug dog. So the drug dog alerts for other drugs that it's possible for a drug dog to now alert on, might smell cocaine, might smell heroin, opiates, whatever it is, and the drug dog alerts on the trunk of the vehicle. Would the officer then have the ability to say, hey, I can open the vehicle. I stopped you. I had a legitimate stop. I believe that you're under the influence of cannabis to the extent that I have probable cause to detain you and to process you. And while I have, or another unit has a drug dog there, they alert on the trunk. And then can I say, okay, now I have probable cause to do the search of that non-cabin area?
You would be able to do more depending on, again, what as the bill has it here. You can't initiate a stop or a search of a person, motor vehicle, or a vessel based solely on one of the three factors that was listed: the odor of cannabis, possession, or suspicion of that the person has the personal use amount, so 1.5 ounces or less, or the presence of cash or currency in proximity to the cannabis without any other indicia of a intent to distribute. So if they are searching based on something else outside of that, they would still be able to search to conduct a stop or search of the car.
So if a drug dog alerted, and I know you practice far more in this field and have more knowledge about it than me, I don't know if a drug dog is so attuned and so well trained that they alert to the difference between the personal use amount of marijuana, or they may alert based upon a larger amount, or they may alert simply based upon a sensitivity to perhaps opioids, heroin, things of that nature. If they did that, are you suggesting then that the officer would be within his abilities or her abilities to say, hey, I have a basis to do that? I'm not just basing on the fact that I pulled you over and you have a personal use marijuana. I have a drug dog alert, and so I think that possibly could mean you have above a personal use amount, that you're perhaps trafficking, or that you have other forms of narcotics in your trunk.
I would say that if you're going to have a drug detecting dog there, that you probably do have more of a suspicion than something greater than sheer possession of marijuana if you're going to call a canine to come over and do a sweep of the car. And that's, I believe, what police officers are going to have to do. They're going to have to be able to articulate something other than those three standards that I stated a moment ago in order to be able to conduct those searches and stops.
And I appreciate the clarification. I just want to make sure, we don't want to unduly arrest people who are just simply legally possessing marijuana. But we also, I would think, we don't want to let people go. There are very good criminal defense lawyers out there. We don't want to let people go because they say, well, we're going to suppress all of the results of the search because we're going to roll back the thing and say, well, gee, the only reason you were searching is because you saw some marijuana, and so now, hey, in the trunk, the drug detecting dog alerted, and you had $10,000 worth of heroin and an illegal handgun, but we suppress all of that because the reason for the search was based upon you were smoking pot in the car, and the drug detecting dog, smelled it. So, and you can comment on that or not. I just appreciate the clarification. That was my concern with the amendment, to better understand it. Thank you.
Madam Speaker.
Yes.
I have a couple questions for the floor leader.
Chairman of the committee.
Thank you, sir. So I understand, I believe the intent of the bill is because, in 24 hours, we're going to be walking around the streets of Annapolis, and there'll be lots of folks walking around with the odor of alcohol emitting from them, and we want to create parity between cannabis and alcohol. I guess one of my questions is about the probable cause. So in a situation where I may observe a vehicle where the engine's running, I smell cannabis emitting from the vehicle, there's a lot of smoke inside the vehicle, and there's only one person in the vehicle, would that be a probable cause for me to initiate a stop?
The question is, I guess, in that case, whether you're talking about whether the person is would you be investigating based on them potentially be driving under the influence of cannabis?
Correct.
So if you'd have to be able to demonstrate that they're actually operating the vehicle, which there are tests for that to make sure. And in the scenario that you laid out, I think it would require more information to find out whether they were actually operating the vehicle, or whether they were sitting in a parked car with nothing else. But again, the three standards are: first, that an officer could not arrest solely for odor, for possession because they believe that they have the personal use amount or less, or because there is some amount of money sitting next to an amount of cannabis. If they saw a person using the cannabis and we passed last year, not passed, it's going to be consistent with what we have already in the law. It says you can't smoke cannabis already if you are in a car. So if an officer saw someone smoking cannabis in a car and saw them actually doing it, then that's one thing, and they would be able to stop and conduct a search. That's one thing. The distinction, though, that a lot of people have run into in our state is that they merely smell like the odor of cannabis, and the officer uses that reason and that reason alone to stop them. And the challenge with cannabis, to be sure, and a lot of people have talked to me about it, a lot of people will continue to talk to me about the odor of cannabis, and some people really don't like it. And I get that, and I understand that. The issue with cannabis is that the odor does tend to linger, and it lingers beyond the time that the person actually may have been ingesting it. So that's what we're also trying to recognize and get at, is that this is different from alcohol in that way.
Absolutely, and that's what I was trying to get at in terms of that specific scenario where I think we address if somebody is, behind the wheel, engine running, there's smoke emitting from the vehicle and a strong odor. That's pretty clearly that person is, in control of the vehicle, consuming cannabis. So that would allow for a law enforcement to initiate a stop.
And would be able to conduct a search consistent with what's in the bill.
Absolutely.
If that person is operating a vehicle, yes.
And I guess the last question is same for public consumption related to, so if law enforcement walk down the street, they see somebody smoking something, whether it's a vape or whether it's, whatever the case may be, and they also smell the odor of cannabis, that would also be eligible for a citation at that point.
What the issue there is that, again, that's existing case law in many cases where officers are not able to act on searching a person or stopping a person solely based on the odor of a cannabis. So I don't believe that they would be able to do that solely based on the odor of cannabis.
Is that parity with alcohol? So if I see somebody consuming alcoholic beverage in public, would I be able to cite them? Or would law enforcement be able to cite them?
Depending on whether your county has the open container laws and what the open container law says in your particular county, there's a distinction there. But having said that, the officer would not be able to stop somebody sheerly for the odor of cannabis. They would need something more.
That's what I'm saying. If they observed the odor of cannabis and observed them partaking of what they reasonably believe to be cannabis, just like with alcoholic beverage, would that be allowed under this bill?
If it's consistent with the public place requirement, if they are in what is considered a public place, then yeah.
Thank you for answering my question, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Yes. Is there any further debate? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Report of the Committee on Ways and Means, report number 14. Clerk will read the first bill.
Also 294, County Boards of Education due process proceedings for children with disabilities, burden of proof, favorable.
The question for the House is the adoption of the favorable report. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The favorable report is adopted. Are there any amendments to this bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Also 509, State Board of Elections, Municipal Elections, publication of results on website. Favorable amendments. Amendment number 1.
Move so much be considered. Madam Speaker, I apologize.
Recognizing the committee chair.
Move so much be considered the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
The committee amendments strike the requirement that the State Board of Elections create an electronic portal for submission of municipal election results and require municipalities to submit election results 30 days after the election is certified. Move the amendments.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Amendments have been adopted. Question now is adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Seeing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read next bill.
House Bill 768, Economic Development, Western Maryland Economic Future Investment Board, and Senator George C. Edwards Fund. Alterations. Favorable amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognize the sponsor of the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move so much be considered the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
Amendment 1 is technical. Amendment 2 strikes provisions renaming the board and establishing a separate voting board. Also alters the membership of the investment board and designates certain members as non-voting members, clarifies provisions concerning the salaries and duties of the executive director, maintains the Tri-County Council as the administrator of the Senator George C. Edwards Fund, and alters the effective date of the bill. Move the amendments. Go Terps. Thank you.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Amendments have been adopted. Question now is adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 770, Publicly Funded Full-Day Pre-Kindergarten Program, Tier 1 Child, Alteration of Definition. Favorable amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing the floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Amendment number 1 moves so much be considered the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
Amendment number 1 is technical. Amendment number 2 alters the definition of Tier 1 children to include homeless children, brings Tier 2 children who have a disability or are from homes where English is not the primary language into the publicly funded pre-kindergarten program next school year, adds a member to the Maryland Consortium on Coordinated Community Supports, and makes alterations to the career ladder under the Blueprint for Maryland's Future. Move the amendments.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The amendments have been adopted. Question now is adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read next bill.
House Bill 1288, Video Lottery Employee Licenses, Crimes of Moral Turpitude or Gambling Offenses. Alterations. Favorable amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing the floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move so much be considered the reading of the amendment.
So ordered.
The amendment clarifies that the exemption from automatic disqualification only applies to misdemeanor offenses and does not apply to crimes involving gambling. Move the amendment.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The amendments have been adopted. Question now is adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. That ends the work at the desk for right now. Committee announcements. Appropriations.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Appropriations Full Committee will meet at 2:30. Please listen for subcommittee votes before then, and then we will be back for bill hearings after second session.
Okay. Judiciary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, the House Judiciary Committee is going to be having a voting session at 2:15. Subcommittee chairs will have a meeting at 1:45.
Environment and Transportation.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Environment and Transportation Committee will have a public bill hearing for one bill at 1:30, and I believe that we will have a voting session 1/2 hour before the next floor session. Perhaps.
Ways and Means.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Ways and Means Committee will have a voting session at 2:15 p.m. today.
Economic Matters.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The House Economic Matters Committee will have a brief hearing immediately after the floor session. A brief hearing immediately after the floor session. Thank you.
Health and Government Operations.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Health and Government Operations Committee will actually have a voting session at 2:45. In addition to that, Madam Speaker, we will have bill hearings at 6:15 tonight.
Okay. We're coming back at 3:30 this afternoon. So keep that in mind, what you say. Yes.
Just real quick, the Frederick County delegation will meet immediately outside the doors here for a very fast voting session. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Okay. Any subcommittee announcements? Oh, gosh. Oh, everybody is just go around, right here. Public safety.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Public Safety will meet immediately following session in room 145 for a vote.
Natural Resources.
Thank you, Madam Speakers. Natural Resources will meet immediately after bill hearings, but immediately after motor vehicles. Thank you so much.
Education.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Education and Economic Development Subcommittee of Appropriations will be meeting for a brief voting session at 2:15 in the Appropriations hearing room.
Health.
Health Occupations is not bringing up the rear, but we will be meeting immediately after session virtually.
Health and Human Services.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Health and Social Services Subcommittee of Appropriations will meet immediately after session in room 150 to vote on one bill.
Government Ops.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Government Operations and Health Facilities Subcommittee will be meeting virtually at 1:30.
Transportation.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Transportation Environment Subcommittee of Appropriations will meet right after the floor in the Appropriations Committee room for a voting session.
Environment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Environment Subcommittee will be meeting virtually after the end of second session.
Natural Resources. No. Real Property.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Real Property will meet after the voting session, after Natural Resources. Stay tuned. Housing and Real Property. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Motor Vehicles.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Motor Vehicles will meet immediately after the bill hearing in E&T.
Yes.
Local government.
Local government.
The Local Government Subcommittee of E&T will meet virtually immediately following this session.
All righty. Yes, delegation.
Education.
Education.
Thank you. Education Subcommittee of Ways and Means might meet. Watch your signal.
Any delegation announcements? Yes. Baltimore City.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Baltimore City House delegation will be meeting for a brief meeting at 8:30 in the morning on Zoom.
Any other delegation? Anne Arundel.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Anne Arundel County delegation will be meeting on Zoom at 8:30 tomorrow for presentations only. We will not be voting.
Okay. All right. Prince George's.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Prince George's County House delegation will be meeting tomorrow morning at 9 for a briefing.
Montgomery.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Montgomery County House delegation will be meeting tomorrow on Zoom at 10:15.
Eastern Shore.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Eastern Shore delegation will be meeting at 9 a.m. Tomorrow morning on Zoom.
Okay. And no one else. Okay. Any caucus announcements? Personal or guest announcements?
Madam Speaker, you were right the first time. Delegation too. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
the Baltimore, you're on the delegation, so you probably expected there was a meeting. Baltimore County delegation will meet at 9 a.m. tomorrow for briefings. Thank you.
Personal or guest? Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just want to reward real quick some of these guests that stayed and watched us all day. From folks from the American Red Cross are here for American Red Cross Awareness Month. The American Red Cross was founded in 1881 by Clara Barton, a remarkable woman who dedicated her life to helping others. Today, the Red Cross helps volunteers in Maryland and continues to carry out Clara's mission. In 2022, 6,000 Red Cross volunteers from the national capital and greater Chesapeake region provided support, food, comfort to families affected by 1,332 local disasters, including home fires, including one in my district. They also collected 136,000 units of blood to help accident and burn victims, heart surgery, and organ transplant patients, and those with leukemia, cancer, and sickle cell disease. In addition, they've supported service members and veterans, as well as their families and caregivers with critical community services. Moreover, they've trained 128,000 people in first aid, CPR, and other life-saving skills. Madam Speaker, in the front gallery, we have my executive director, Ms. Misty Bruce, for the Central Maryland region. I'm asking y'all to stand. Also, Ms. Jacqueline Brooks, who is the board chair. We also have today the executive directors of the Delmarva region, Ms. Teresa Young, the D.C. area, Ms. Courtney Bolger, the Montgomery, Howard, and Frederick, Kurt Luthi, Southern Maryland, Allie Kelly, Virginia, Erwin Sterling, and the regional executive, Mr. Dale Kuntz. If you all could just join me in recognizing their good work.
Madam Speaker.
Yes.
I need to make a change in the Housing and Real Property Subcommittee. We will now have a meeting before voting session, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Housing and Real Property before voting session. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, and to reiterate, now the voting session will be at 3 p.m.
Okay. All right. Any other changes from what you said previously? Okay. All right. Quorum call before adjournment.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their presence? Clerk will take the call. There being 136 members present, the House is still in session, recognizing the majority leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. First, colleagues, the doors will be locked if you want to leave your laptops in here between sessions. With that said, I move that the House stands adjourned until Thursday, March 16th at 3:30 p.m., Legislative Day, March 8th.